Let's go ahead and call the Senate to order. The Sergeant at Arms will secure the doors. Members, please take your seats. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. President.
All right, Senators, we are very, very pleased to have the Reverend Dr. Heber Brown III from the Pleasant Hope Baptist Church in Baltimore, Maryland, guest of the distinguished senator from the 43rd District. Members, please rise for the invocation.
Good morning. Thank you for this invitation to share. I know this is a big day for all of you, and the intensity of the session is increasing. I'm prayerful that this prayer can help to give you some wind to your sails and even calm our hearts for the important work you have to do. Let us pray. To the God known by many names and reverenced by those the world over, we pause at the start of this day's proceedings to honor you and to ask your Spirit to guide the occupants of this room in their every action today. May their thoughts, words, and deeds bring glory to your name and support to our communities. Heighten their sensitivity to the poor, the brokenhearted, the captives, the blind, and those who are oppressed. Stifle the worrying tendencies of ego, unfettered ambition, and self-centered action. May the spirit of genuine service rule this day and the remainder of this session. During this Women's History Month, may we also be inspired by the remarkable legacies of women like Lucretia Kennard Daniels, the first black female supervisor of schools for black children in Caroline and Queen Anne's counties, Dr. Enola P. McMillan, the first woman elected president of the National NAACP, Gloria Richardson, leader of the Cambridge movement on the Eastern Shore, B. Gaddy, tireless advocate for those who were hungry and unstably housed in Baltimore City, Dr. Ann Emery, Lily Mae Carroll Jackson, and so many more, known and unknown, who helped to make this state as good as it is. May the eternal flames of their lives and legacies light the path for us as we do our collective best to live for others. For in this way, we will live lives that are worth being remembered. It is in your holy name that I pray. Amen.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 43rd District.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Reverend Dr. Heber Brown III is a community organizer, social entrepreneur, and the senior pastor of Pleasant Hope Baptist Church in Baltimore. I first met Pastor Brown during my election in 2010 with the intention of stopping by a few churches that morning and early afternoon. You see, I was raised Catholic, and now I'm a Presbyterian, so I imagined that 45 minutes or so would be fine, and I wouldn't require a great deal of effort. However, the joy and music and message of Pleasant Hope Baptist Church had me there for more than 2 hours and left me feeling inspired and energized. For nearly 2 decades, Dr. Brown has been a catalyst for personal transformation and social change in the service of our community and our Creator. In 2013, he received a fellowship award from the Beatitudes Society. In 2015, he launched the Black Church Food Security Network, which advances health, wealth, and power by helping African American congregations establish gardens and church-owned land and partner with black farmers in Maryland. In 2019, he received the coveted Emerging Leaders Award from the Cornell Foundation. With all of that and more I could share, the true gift that is to our world, that is him, came on April 23rd of last year, when I had to make the most difficult and selfless and loving decision of my life. I made the treatment choice that will allow my mother to take her last breath and when her body was ready and in peace. Because we were still in the midst of COVID, My mother could not be surrounded by her 6 children, grandchildren, or brothers and sisters. My last duty for her in her life was to surround her in a prayer for certainty of a heavenly home and peace in transitioning from the land of the dying to the land of the living. There was no time to bring in a hospital chaplain, and I did not have the words. But I knew someone who would. I called Pastor Brown at 9 p.m., and he answered. Pastor Brown's prayers were not of loss, but gave a joyful voice of comfort to me, my sisters, and most of all, my mother, Mrs. Patricia Ann Washington. My family and I are forever grateful. Mr. President, while his words that night are known only to a few, may the record of Maryland journalize his remarks to this body forever and ever. Amen.
Without objection, we will certainly journalize that invocation.
Mr. President.
Thank you, sir. Chair recognizes the senator from the 41st District.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the body, please indulge me for just a moment, just to follow up with the senator from the 43rd District's incredible words about Pastor Brown. I really cannot let this opportunity go by without saying some things about Pastor Brown. I've had a long record of service in the communities, in the streets with Pastor Brown. In addition to the stellar minister that he has been at Pleasant Hope Baptist Church, Pastor Brown and I stayed out all night one night in the street after a firebombing of residents in his district. Pastor Brown came down to Annapolis multiple times when I was in the House of Delegates. He helped us to stop the building of a youth jail. He came down to help us fight for police reform years before we were able to get what we got passed last year. Pastor Brown, I have similar, it's hard to talk about Pastor Brown without a lot of emotion. I have another story. So many of you know, in 2016, my mother passed away. We've been multi-generational, lifelong Episcopalians. And she said to me, near the end, listen, I know that I want you to stay a member of St. James and be Episcopal, but if you want to change to Baptist and become a member of Pastor Brown's church, I understand. So it's a great honor and a privilege for me to have Pastor Brown here. And Pastor Brown, we hope this will not be the last time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for that reflection. Thank you so much. Whew. All right. Has everyone recorded their presence? It appears so. The clerk will take the call. With 47 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland is now in session. Full body, everyone here. We are all healthy. Everyone is well. Perfect timing. Right in the heat of things. Babies are born. We're all good. All right. Let's do introductions. Chair recognizes the co-chair of the Protocol Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very thrilled to have with us today 3 of our pages in person. So if our pages would come to the front of the dais, thank you very much. And let me introduce to you Dea Aditoro from Prince George's County, District 24, Largo High School. Dea's in the middle there. Alina Allure from Baltimore County, District 44B, Catonsville High School. And Una Mecki from Montgomery County, District 16, Richard Montgomery High School. Please welcome them. And we know this is going to be a very exciting day for them today. So please extend personal best wishes to them if you get an opportunity before they leave today. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you so much, Madam Co-Chair, and greatly appreciate your presence. You all came for a good day. You're going to see an exciting debate and on several issues, so we hope you have a wonderful day today. Thank you for being here. You're going to get some steps in, I think, with some amendments, I suspect. Yes, Chair recognizes the Senator from Baltimore County.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It's hard to follow my two colleagues talking about their moms and the importance of Pastor Brown in their lives, but I'm really thrilled to be here this morning. I want to introduce some guests that we are hosting, and it feels really appropriate to follow in their footsteps, and also it being March and being Women's History Month. And I want to invite all of you to the second floor of the James Building, and I want to thank the Senate President's Office and Joy in the office, and many months or weeks ago when I saw that there was a blank space in the hallway on the second floor because of the transfer of the portrait of Verda Welcome, I thought, we need to fill that space somehow. What and who would be appropriate to put there? And so I thought of a woman I had met back in 2004 in a different life, a different job. I met former Senator Rosalie Silber Abrams. And she was really groundbreaking. And I want to introduce you to her daughter, Lissa Abrams, who is here with us today, who is a constituent of our colleague from the 41st District, and Lissa's granddaughter, Jordan Herlick, who is a 6th grader at Franklin Middle School and is a constituent of the senator from District 10, who happened to know, who knew Senator Rosalie Silber Abrams and knew her well. So I want to tell you a little bit about her, because she was really a trailblazer. And Lissa today told me in her first race in 1966 for the House of Delegates, she bucked the party machine and ran on an integrated ticket in Baltimore City and won in the House of Delegates. That was pretty groundbreaking. In 1970, she was elected to the Senate, and she served here. She's passed over 300 bills in her time in the legislature, her 17-year career here. She then left and became the director of the Office of Aging until her retirement in 1996. She won many awards, and she was many firsts. She was the first woman in Maryland to hold the position of Senate Majority Leader. She was the first woman in Maryland to hold the position of Senate Finance Committee Chair, so it is so wonderful that she is followed in her footsteps by our illustrious colleague from District 10. And she was also the first woman to chair the Maryland Democratic Party. She authored legislation creating the Maryland Health Services Cost Review Commission, which really paved the way nationally and was a national model for healthcare reform and cost containment. And she was just a groundbreaker. Before she served in the legislature, she had earned degrees in business and nursing, and she helped to run her family's business. And I don't know if many of you remember going, but I remember going to Silber's Bakery for chocolate top cookies and rye bread. It was a real Baltimore institution for many, many years. So please come to the second floor of the James Building, and they can see their wonderful photograph of Senator Abrams, and I'm just very thankful to have you here today and have everyone meet you and learn a little bit about Senator Rosalie Silber Abrams. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. And we're so honored to have her family here today. Truly a groundbreaker. Thank you so much and thanks to the senator from District 11 for such a thoughtful and creative idea, and mentioned today that it's the spot of where Verda Welcome's portrait once was, and they both served together. So there's this interesting symbolism and sort of the ongoing telling of the story, which is very, very, very neat. Yes, Chair recognizes Senator from District 37.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I too want to welcome the family of Rosalie Abrams here as well. Actually, she was one of my very early role models. I spent a lot of time with her as I was thinking through whether or not I really wanted to run for office, having had such a long career in nursing. So thank you so much. She truly was a pioneer and an inspiration to many of us. God bless. Thank you.
Remarkable. Remarkable. May Chair recognize Senator from District 10.
Guys, I'm here because Rosalie Abrams talked me into running for the House of Delegates.
Look at that.
I lived in her neighborhood, and she walked door to door with me. You know the things you go through the first time that you ever run. And when she was chair of the Maryland Democratic Party, she had a little office on Reed Street in downtown Baltimore. And my husband and I used to go down once a quarter to do her newsletters and help her get those out and into the mail. She was a wonderful inspiration to me, and I'm sure I probably never would have thought of running for office except for Rosalie's encouragement. Thank
Wow,
you.
that's amazing. That's amazing. That is so neat. So it's all of us have a responsibility to figure out who's coming behind us and build the next generation. And clearly, your mother and grandmother did her job. That's amazing. All right, any other introductions? Yes, Chair recognizes the Senator from District 7.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. Doctor of the Day, he's been here several times. I just want to introduce him again. From my district, Dr. Frank Sparandero. He's retired. He's kind of taken some of his retirement to come down here and watch democracy in action, so I appreciate it being here for us.
Excellent. Thank you, Doctor. We appreciate you. Thanks for being here. Any other introductions? If not, so be considered the reading of the journal from the prior legislative day. We have some unfinished business from yesterday. Let's see here. Let's start with the layover calendar. This is layover calendar number 16. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 264, Senator Elfreth, Community Solar Energy Generating Systems, Exemption from Energy and Property Taxes. Questions on the adoption of the committee amendments and the favorable report.
All right, Senators, the question is on the adoption of the two committee amendments. Chair recognizes the floor leader of the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I believe the challenge or the reason for the layover was to conform another bill to this bill, similar provisions, and I believe we've worked that out with the Chair of Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs.
Do we want to...
I would like to move the two amendments in the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves to adopt the two committee amendments in the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The two committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 264 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. We've got another layover bill. This is number 17. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 297, Senator Young, Gaming, Sports Wagering Facilities, Locations. Questions on the adoption of the committee amendment and the favorable report.
All right, question before the body is on the committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Chair recognizes the sponsor of the bill.
Yes, Mr. President. I'd like to special order it for a day. We've had a controversy on the one county, and I think we'll need an amendment to take it out.
Understood. All right. Are there any objections to the senator's motion? Without objection, the bill and the amendments will be special ordered to the appropriate time tomorrow. Next, we have a special order calendar. This is number 40. I don't know if we have to do something on this one too. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 279, Senator Heddleman, Access to Counsel in Evictions, Special Fund Alteration. Bill is on third reading for final passage.
All right. Senate Bill 279 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. Does the senator from the 11th district like to make a motion?
I'm sorry, could I be counted in the green for
The senator
Senate
moves to
Bill
be counted in the
279?
green.
Thank
Are
you
there any
very
objections to
much.
the senator's motion? Without objection, so ordered. All right. Let's go to the next special order calendar, number 42. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 566, Senator Elfreth, State Retirement and Pension System, Investment Climate Risks, Fiduciary Duties. Question is on the adoption of the favorable report.
All right, question is on the favorable report. Chair recognizes the minority leader on the report.
Yes, I want to thank the floor leader. She provided information and my questions were answered.
Questions are answered. All right, any discussion on the report? Discussion on the report? If not, all in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Chair recognizes the senator from the 34th district has an amendment. Pages will please collect the senator's amendment. This is the beginning of getting those steps in. We're going to be super fast today. We've got 3 wonderful pages to help us. All right. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this is an important bill. This deals with the retirement system for all of our state employees and whether how we treat that system. I take that pretty seriously. Currently, the folks involved in the system have a fiduciary duty to manage the system for the benefit of the retirees, and that's their duty. You have a fiduciary duty, and that means that you have to do all your decisions have to be absolutely loyal to the folks, the beneficiaries, and then you also have to act with competence. Those are really the two aspects of that. And so the only issue here is whether this bill might anybody interfere with that. I know that wasn't the intent, but there is what this bill does. If you look at it, it simply deletes what is currently Section G of the bill, which is page 5 of the bill, and that paragraph states the Board of Trustees or any other fiduciary of the several systems may not be held liable for any actions taken or decisions made in good faith. So what's wrong with that? The bill says that in addition to just simply exercising all of your energies to protect the investment and the pension investments, we're also supposed to gather information on whether the investments support green energy policies of this state. And specifically, it provides that once you gather information, which is certainly information gathering is good. You can't have too much knowledge. I have no problem with gathering information. That'd be the top of page 4 of the bill. But then in addition to that, it says that those involved shall review and manage the investments of the several systems to invest and divest funds within the several systems. It also asks them to consider emerging technologies and renewables and energy. So I don't have a problem with the members of the board gathering information on renewables. That's good. I don't have any problem with them considering if I can invest in company A, which is all green energy, and company B, which is a high polluting industry, and they both have the same return, hey, go with the green one. That's fine. It's both consistently, that decision would be consistent with your obligation to your fiduciary duty to the beneficiaries of the system, to both act loyally to them and also with due care. But what troubles me is that this provision G says, and this is an important part here, provision G says that the standard of care here is acting in good faith. If you're dealing with matters related to green energy, the standard of care isn't just, the standard of care is good faith and good faith alone. That's not the same standard of care that they otherwise would have. The standard of care isn't just one of good faith. I mean, good faith says, I didn't intend to defraud you. I tried to act for your benefit. But the duty should be more than that. The duty is one of competence. And so it's that piece of this, that they have to act with competence, that troubles me. So we're urged to say, well, Section H says that nothing in here shall require them to in any way act in contravention of their normal duty to act as their fiduciary obligations, to act with both loyalty and with care. But if we're going to rely on G, if we're going to rely on H, if we're going to say H is the standard, that hey, you still have to act as a fiduciary and you're still bound to act with both loyalty and care, then G is unnecessary. And by putting G in there and saying, hey, we have a different standard on this, and that's just one of good faith, to me that says there's a different standard of care when dealing with matters related to green energy. And that's wrong. They should have the same standard of care. You got to protect the investments. You got to protect the corpus of the trust. You got to grow it. And so to simply say, well, this says that you're not required to avoid your normal duties of care, which is what sort of H says. But G says, yeah, but if you do in green energy, it's just good faith. That's wrong. We got one duty of care. It's the duty of care otherwise established in the statute. You got to be loyal, and you got to exercise due care of someone who's managing a retirement fund. That should be the straight standard. And if that is the only standard, and that's what we're doing, then Section G is completely unnecessary. And the general, and I actually consider the rules of statutory construction. The general rule of care for these fiduciaries, the general rule of care is loyalty and competence. But in statutory construction, specific controls over the general. Specific controls over the general. The general is loyalty and competence. But in green energy, it says just good faith. So that's the specific duty of care. In everything else, you have the normal duties, loyalty and competence, but in these matters, it's just good faith. That's wrong. We should hold these people to the same standard. They should educate themselves. They should know what they're doing. And once they know what they're doing, they should make their decisions with loyalty and due care, not just simply good faith. So I move the amendment, Mr. President. Thank you.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Chair recognizes the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank the maker of the amendment for sharing it with me and having a number of conversations. This is just a disagreement of policy. In our view, the committee's view, H, nothing in this section shall require the Board of Trustees or any other fiduciary of several systems as defined by the fiduciary statute to take action as described in any section. This is the belts and suspenders we put on every single one of our pensions bills to ensure that our trustees are acting in good faith, but also, first and foremost, in their fiduciary role here. We need Section G. It's pretty standard language here, because to exactly the Senator's point, we don't want board members making decisions for any other reason than what is best for the fiduciary responsibility of the system, for that return. So if we take out Section G, it would leave the board liable to significant potential of litigation, and we do not want that threat of litigation to actually influence the board in making investment decisions. That's why G is needed. It's also protected in H. It's a belts and suspenders standard language that we want to ensure the board is making these decisions solely through the lens of their fiduciary role. So I would urge the body to reject the amendment.
All right, Senator, let's see, are there any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the maker of the amendment.
Thank you. And I share, we've gone back and forth on this outside of the floor, and I appreciate your cooperation. And I've even spoken to the folks at the pension board calling and discussing it. Colleagues, that we don't, just remember what the floor leader just said. We don't want them getting sued. We don't want them to be worried about being sued. That's why we put this in here. We don't be worried about being sued. I do. I want them to be worried about being sued. I want my doctor to be worried about being sued when he's operating on me. I want my lawyer to be worried about being sued when he's representing me. That's how we enforce the standard of care. And if you have a bill that says, oh, but don't worry about being sued if you mess up our money, their money, don't worry about being sued, I don't want that standard. I want the same standard of care. And whether you're thinking about investing in matters that affect peace in the world or equity or green energy, those are all great things to have as you're executing your duties. But you just got to remember, the main thing is grow the fund. That's your first obligation, is loyalty and growing the fund. And if you don't do those two things, you might get sued. And that's not a bad thing. And what this says is, well, in all those things I just talked about, if it comes to green energy matters, we're gonna immunize you. So if you decide that in your brain that some new technology, some emerging technology, it would be great if we could take pensioners' money, we can take their money and invest it in some new emerging technology, because I'm really guessing it's going to go well. If that's not the standard of care that every other, if we look around the country and that's not what other pension managers are doing, I think we should be able to sue those people. I think if they blow that, if they make a bad decision, I want to hold their feet to the fire. And this says I can't. In those areas, they're immune. And that's my problem. As long as I acted in good faith. Good faith means I wasn't intending to defraud you. Well, quite frankly, that ain't good enough for me. I don't care if you intended to defraud me or not. I lost my money. And whether you were acting in good faith, I want you to act as a professional, competent pension manager, not as, I can do that job. If the standard of care there is just good faith, give me a job. I can manage the pensions. I'm not trained to do it. I'm not going to give you your best decisions. So, thank you.
Mr. President?
Thank you, Senator. All right, any senators who have not yet spoken wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Again, we have incredibly talented and smart people working for our pension system and ensuring that we are seeing significant returns year in and year out for our pensioners across the state. And they are making these decisions, again, solely through their lens as a fiduciary of that system. Nothing in this bill threatens that fiduciary role. This is a balanced bill. It has the system support. It doesn't tell them to make this investment or that investment or look towards this industry or that industry. It simply codifies existing practice. It gives them tools they need to make the most responsible decisions about the sustainability of our pension system and make sure that they are still using their fiduciary lens in making those decisions. Again, it's a very balanced bill that ensures they are taking in all of the information to make the best, most educated investments they can make. And with that, Mr. President, I urge the body to reject the amendment.
All right. Senators requested a roll call vote. No further discussion. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 30 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 566 is hereby ordered printed for third reader. All right, let's go ahead. We have some bills from the House. This is calendar 7. Clerk will read the bills.
House Bill 210, Delegate Grammar, Criminal Trial, Spousal Privilege Exception, JPR.
Majority Leader moves so be considered the reading of the bills. They will be referred to their appropriate standing committees. We have a report from the Committee on Rules. Rules?
The Senate Executive Nominations. Rules.
Sorry.
Report of the Committee on Rules, Report Number 3, Senate Bill 907, Senator Simon Eyre. Elections, polling place location, restrictions, repeal, re-referred to EHE.
All right, Majority Leader moves so be considered the reading of the bills. Chair recognizes the Chair of the Pension Committee. The
Thank you.
Rules Committee.
It's okay, Mr. President.
Pensions in my brain, sorry.
It's all right. Thank you, Mr. President. The committee did meet yesterday, and the Rules Committee did vote on the bills that were submitted, and they have now been referred to the appropriate committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Rules Committee's been doing the work and moving things along. They'll be referred to the appropriate, re-referred to the appropriate standing committee. We now have a report from the Committee on Executive Nominations.
Senate Executive Nominations Committee Report Number 5. Committee reports favorably on the gubernatorial appointments and recommends that the Senate of Maryland advise and consent to the appointments. The report is on the floor system.
Chair recognizes Chair of the Executive Nominations Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate accept report number 5 of the Senate Executive Nominations Committee in open session, and that we special order the report until Tuesday, March 15th.
All right, the chairman's moved that we accept the report in open session and that we special order the report until Tuesday. Are there any objections? Without objections, so ordered. Senators, it's a long list. Please make sure to look through the list. We'll take it up on Tuesday. If there are any separations or desires to vote separately on any of the appointees, we will certainly accommodate that. So just take a look before we get back to it next week. All right, let's jump into our layover calendar. This is number 18. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate Bill 528, Senator Pinsky, Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022. Question is on the adoption of the committee amendments and the favorable report.
All right, Senators, before the body at the moment are the 10 committee amendments. Are there any discussion on those amendments? Chair recognizes the Senator from the 33rd District on the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question for the floor leader, if I may.
Will the floor leader yield? Appears so. Senator may proceed.
Mr. Chairman, we spent a lot of time in this on this bill in committee, but in reviewing it last night, on pages 47 and 48, there seems to be the same language written twice. I'm wondering if you could share with the body why that repetitiveness occurred. It has to do with the building standards.
As I recall, as I recall, committee counsel said, in terms of how it's drafted, it had to be repeated twice because it's
different
in two
sections of the code?
Yes.
Okay. One of the questions in that section, while we're
because the net zero goal sunsets, we have to repeat it in 2 sections.
Okay, very good. On page 47, line 13, the bill talks about the department is going to require owners of the covered buildings to measure and report direct emissions. I've had some questions, Mr. Chairman. How do you measure direct emissions?
As I understand it, you use the reporting. Well, we struck that. If you look on line 13, measure and report direct emissions.
Oh, I'm sorry. I looked at it this morning and it seemed to be there. That's why I'm asking.
Is there any chance that the chairman maybe look at the reprint and the senator is looking at the bill text?
Yeah, I'm looking at the bill
first reader.
Oh, I don't know if it possibly first reader. You know, I'm technically incompetent in some of this computer stuff.
No. This is, but I'm.
Okay, so you're saying the measure and report directly has been removed from the bill?
Correct.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I have one more, but in the bill, there's some issues about money for retrofitting to help low-income housing. Now, this is an allocation of our state tax dollars to that program?
Yes, it's to get a head start on the retrofitting and putting some special energy in low and moderate income housing, multifamily housing.
And again, the lack of information on myself is it a one-time allocation, or will that go on for several years?
3 years, I believe.
Okay.
Yes, 3 years.
Okay, very good. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. But I would encourage you not to sit down. I think some of my peers might have other questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from Montgomery County on the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. And if the floor leader would please, because I'd like to visit a little bit more the language that my friend from Anne Arundel County was just asking about. Last time I had looked at the bill, the language he had referred to was still in it. I see that there was an amendment since that time and it's slightly revised, but I think the questions may still be applicable. So as amended, the language reads, to facilitate the development of building energy performance standards under this section, the department shall require the owners of covered buildings to, and where it used to say measure and report direct emissions, it now reads, use the Energy Star Portfolio Manager or another benchmarking tool designated by the department to collect and report benchmarking data to the department annually beginning in 2025. Could you please share with the body what the Energy Star Portfolio Manager is, what it's going to provide to help facilitate the department to come up with rules and regulations, and the logic to this being reported on an annual basis? What will it entail?
It's my it's my understanding that the department will collect energy data, basically, that the owners get from the utility industry for their buildings that they own. They will get that data and use that to benchmark that sector, whether it's supermarkets, high-rise office buildings, shopping centers, which I know the senator's familiar with, and they will collect that data, figure out how much the emissions that are coming out, direct emissions from those buildings in that particular sector, to create a basic benchmark from which the department will develop a plan of how overall, and then in sub sectors, reduce by 30%.
And I completely agree with you that that's the way it would have functioned prior to the amendment. So the bill, as read by, again, by my friend from Anne Arundel County, that's exactly what would have happened. But now there's an amendment that says owners of covered buildings are going to use the Energy Star Portfolio Manager to collect and report benchmarking
or another
data.
benchmark, or I mean, it has a couple of options of how this is done.
Correct. So please share with us, if you would, what is the Energy Star Portfolio Manager? What might be these other benchmarking tools? I mean, I've never heard of the Energy Star Portfolio Manager. What is that?
Well, in terms of how this is being done, I'm a little surprised you're not familiar because Montgomery County has already started this.
The senator,
No,
not you.
Montgomery County has already started doing this. They've actually put this in place already.
I've not been approached by anyone in Montgomery County telling me that this is something that I am doing.
Okay. Many commercial buildings already use the Energy Star Portfolio Manager. It is an interactive software that helps calculate for them. I'm not an expert in the technology or the software.
Well, my point is it's in the bill, so would it not be relevant to understand exactly what it is we are now going to be requiring of these covered building owners, that they are now going to have to use either this, which they may or may not have, like I said, I've never heard of it, or another benchmarking tool. And again, so exactly what are we asking these people to do, and what data are they now going to have to be entering into this Energy Star Portfolio Manager? The bill, as originally before this amendment, I agree, the data that was going to be reported would come directly from the utility companies. But now you have amended the bill to require, and may I just quickly pause for a moment and ask the chair, how many buildings is this information going to be reported from? Across the state of Maryland, how many buildings will be reporting this information? Let's start with that.
Okay, the bill covers those buildings that are over 25,000 square feet.
I understand.
Minus those buildings that are exempt. I don't have that actual number before me as to how many buildings there are. I remember hearing a number from the NIOP or the building, but I can't give you that figure.
So at no point during the entire time that this bill has been being worked on, no one took the time to try to investigate this mandate that is being placed on these building owners, and how many are going to be affected, whether it's 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 or more. There was no consideration as to...
That number is somewhere, Senator. I don't have it with me.
It is somewhere, but I think it's relevant to the conversation and the legislation that's before us, because now you have a requirement that whether it's 1 or 100,000 or more, they are going to have to be using a designated product that we don't even know, we can't find out exactly what it is.
Senator, you know, let's read it carefully. It says, or another benchmarking tool. If you receive the data from the utilities in terms of how much natural gas, oil, or coal, whatever you're using, that will be reported and can be used. We're not taking that off the table. It just because the building industry actually has a tool, a software tool they already use, so we name that. And I don't know if that came from the Department of Environment or Public Service Commission. It's one already in use, and we think it may actually be expanded, and we think it's a good tool, but we're not limiting it to that. So you're concerned that you like the old language. no one is precluded from using their bills from the utility sector. I mean, so
That's not provided for in the bill. It doesn't say or the data, and let me share with you. If the bill reflected a simple or that data provided, that would alleviate the concern.
well,
Because the bill's been changed, Mr. Chair.
yes. And another benchmarking tool, if you have the bill, your monthly bill for how much gas or coal you're using, that is considered a benchmarking tool. I'm trying to understand.
I think it's very clear. What I'm trying to understand is you have specified in the language of the bill, Mr. Chair, that the Energy Star portfolio manager or another benchmarking tool designated by the department is going to be utilized. It no longer says report the information. And so again, I also question if there are tens of thousands of these happening and the department's going to be receiving this information on an annual basis, what is anticipated that is going to change from 2025 and 2026 that the department is going to be flooded, inundated with this information? How are they going to process it?
And let me answer that. If we look at the next page, section D, unfortunately I haven't committed all the pages to memory yet. It says very simply, electric companies and gas companies shall provide energy data, including whole building and aggregate data, to the owners of covered buildings for benchmarking purposes. And then the section you talked about referred to benchmarking purposes. So the exact point you want is in section D.
Mr. Chairman, you changed the language. Yes, the reason that language is there, Mr. Chairman, is because I came to your committee and I asked, how is that information going to be provided when the utility companies are the sole source? So the language was included that now the utility companies will provide that information, but the bill has changed from that information now being what goes to the department, that it goes to the covered building owners, and they are now going to somehow have to take all of that data and insert it into this Energy Star portfolio manager system, whatever that may be. And I'm curious as to why it was changed. This language was not there, and now it is. So you've created a mandate that we'd have yet to solve. How it's going to be done, we can't even get an explanation as to what this is.
The committee amendments.
I've explained it twice, Senator. I mean, I understand that a couple words of the amendment, your amendment that we adopted, were changed, and I can't remember if that came from the Department of Environment or Public Service Commission. It accomplishes the same thing. I understand you're not familiar with the Energy Star portfolio manager. There are a number of large office buildings that use it. You are not required to use it if you hypothetically own any property. You can use the bills that come from the utility company as your benchmarking tool. I'm not sure how many more times I can say it.
Mr. Chairman, if you put the exact language that you just spoke back in this bill, you and I will be in complete agreement. So if you're willing to do that, I'll have an amendment prepared that does that. Is that satisfactory?
Senator, Section D says that exact thing, and it refers back to the comment you've... Look, you can propose any amendment. We accepted one of yours already. The bill's very clear.
Senator, let's do this. If the senator is interested in preparing an amendment, we can take up the debate on the amendment, and let's see if we can get through the committee amendment so that we're all talking about the same document.
Thank you for that. Mr. President, quick question as to how this is going to be going forward. Is today the only opportunity to introduce amendments? Is it possible that the bill will be special ordered so that there is an opportunity to get an amendment appropriately prepared that addresses the issue?
Yeah, I mean, let's see where we get today. You know, we want to be deliberative and thoughtful, but we want to move it along. So let's see how long we can. Let's see how far we get today, and we'll make an assessment.
Thank you for that.
All right, on the amendments. Any further discussion on the amendments? Chair recognizes the senator from the 21st district.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the chair yield for a question?
Appears so. Senator may proceed.
I believe you indicated that school systems were excluded from the building provisions of the bill. Did I understand that correctly?
From the retrofit, yes.
Okay. Are other government buildings excluded?
No. No.
Why are school system buildings excluded if other government buildings aren't?
Well, as my seatmate said, there are a lot of school buildings.
Right.
As we know, there are probably 1,000.
Right.
We decided to work prospectively. We're trying to build net zero buildings going forward. We set up a special fund to do that. There's going to be an amendment encouraging the use of solar, but putting this responsibility on those 1,000 schools or however many there are across the state affects the taxpayer, and the buildings are in different postures, so we made a policy decision not to include schools.
So all buildings in the state, privately owned, government owned, nonprofit owned, except school buildings,
well,
will have to
we have other
participate.
exemptions too.
You have several other exemptions.
Agricultural buildings.
Right.
We have
Fair enough.
Historic buildings. We have a list of four or five categories.
Okay, but wouldn't it make sense, Mr. Chairman, if we're trying to meet these ambitious goals, to take a big piece of the inventory of buildings that are not up to the standard of the bill, particularly ones that are under public control, and include them? It seems like sort of counterintuitive. What am I missing?
I guess the political debate that's going on in this complex for the last 2 weeks of people who have opposed not only going forward on new construction, but even on doing retrofitting in any sector. There's been a lot of pushback, and we've actually heard some on the floor today, I believe, on that very issue. The committee made a decision that was probably a bridge too far for a conversation another day.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, on the amendments, Chair recognizes the senator from the 36th District.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The floor leader could yield for questions, please.
Appears so. Senator may proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, going back to a little bit of what we discussed yesterday in Amendment 10, and now we find out that there are 2 places where this language exists, and that's on purpose now. And Mr. President, I might echo the comments of my colleague from Montgomery County. I think some amendments may have been prepared that have not seen this in 2 different places, so I think there might be an opportunity that we might need some more time, but we'll get to that.
And we'll check with the amendments office too.
Appreciate that. As part of Amendment 10 on page 49, and again it's on page 28 as well, we talk about this preemption language. And this would allow a county to develop more stringent building standards than this bill allows for, correct? In a sense, this language could allow a county to specifically put in building standards that require all electric, in a sense, a de facto ban on natural gas. Is that accurate?
This bill doesn't deal with promoting or banning. It talks about emissions reduction. It's about energy performance standards. It's not about the type of energy you use. This does not, and again, I can't speak for the other counties, but my understanding, even in the one county that's already pursuing emissions reductions, they're setting emissions reductions. They are not talking about banning, prohibiting any type of energy. So in other words, they are telling building owners, look, you want to put solar on, you want to redo your windows when you do renovations, insulation, maybe turn your elevators into energy producing situations, or if you are renovating and replace your furnace with heat pumps, whatever. It does not get into saying that you have to stop or start using a certain energy. So I think that's sort of a straw man, if you will, and that's man, quotes around the man. I don't think that's what Montgomery County, which is one of the counties, is doing. This bill does not say, that
Then maybe I'm not understanding why this language needs to be in the bill. And if I do understand what I
because
think,
we want, look, we have a major challenge ahead of us. And so far, people are demurring of addressing that challenge. They're happy taking low-hanging fruit, but the situation is not getting any better. It's getting worse in this state and in this country and on this planet. So this bill wants to set a floor. But why set a bill to take a step forward and put a ceiling? So we're saying if a county, we want to give flexibility to Cecil County. We want to give flexibility to Charles County. We want to give flexibility to Montgomery County. If in their situation and their county council decide this is a good idea and we want to take it a step further, if the people of that county endorse that and want to do it, they can do it. We're just simply saying they have to at least meet what's in this bill.
well, no. The bill says here's what you have to meet. This specific amendment says you can exceed it.
And we have that, I can't tell you in how many sites in our code that we give flexibility to the locals to exceed. We have many cases where we set a floor, but we don't set a ceiling. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We believe in a local initiative to pursue if they have a certain vision or way of doing business that county or that jurisdiction is comfortable with. We don't want to preclude that.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, you're aware of the letter from the Attorney General that addressed this issue from Montgomery County, I'm assuming, right? Is that not accurate? Okay. There was a very specific letter to the Attorney General's office that asked advice whether state law preempts the ability of local governments to prohibit gas hookups in newly constructed buildings. Okay, so this was a big concern for Montgomery County specifically, and
that's not in this bill, Senator.
Mr. Chairman,
but to be very clear, this bill has removed that, and that exceeding is on the retrofit. It is not talking about telling someone they can't lay pipe.
It's been removed, but I am convinced that this preemption language that you've put back into the bill, after you remove the de facto ban on gas.
The committee, Senator. The committee.
After you remove the de facto ban on natural gas, the committee then made sure in two different places it explicitly allows a county to go forward with higher standards than what this bill allows. And that's what the Attorney General's response was, that if the General Assembly explicitly allows it, then a county can go forward with that. So there was a very specific reason why this language was added by the committee in the when the de facto ban on natural gas came out. And I'm just trying to understand, if counties can go forward with this already, why is this language needed?
First of all, it deals with the energy performance standards, not the fuel source. I mean, we are not dealing with that in this bill. We are not talking about fuel sources. We're not talking about in retrofit. We're not talking about in new construction because that's been removed. We're talking about standards, and that is being used in terms of emissions. And that's what the intent of this bill is. The broad scope of this bill is to reduce emissions. Some people call it decarbonization.
Would you believe then that a energy performance standard that a county may enact that requires all electrification of a building is a performance standard as you're speaking about?
I'd have to go back to the definitions. No.
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 So do you think right now a county would be able to enact a ban on natural gas?
I don't know if they can ban a fuel source. I don't know.
So again, in the original bill as drafted, that de facto ban was in place. And did the committee find out that that was not allowed? Or, I mean, what there is a reason why that.
Well, it's my understanding, and again, it's a different state, so I don't know about constitutionality. I think New York City, 10 million people, I think they put that into place. But we chose to not include it.
Okay, thank you. Also, Amendment 10, Section 10 is all brand new language. And this specifically talks about the alignment with the Commission on Climate Change's recommendation to transition to all-electric building code in the state.
It is intent language. It is not locking anybody or anything in any place. You know,
well, it just says the General Assembly supports moving towards broader electrification.
Well, we're just following the recommendation of the Hogan administration. You know, on the Climate Commission, which has the majority of the members from the administration, the vote was 22-2. 22-2. And actually, the representative from PEPCO, the very same company that's opposing this bill, voted
Senator,
for this.
if we can avoid referencing specific individuals or organizations.
Well, I do think it's important to mention that the administration, which has a majority of the votes on the Climate Commission, recommended not only what's in this bill, the Hogan administration recommended ensuring that all new construction was electric. And you know, we like to take advice from the administration, and 22-2. I mean, the scientists, the Office of People's Counsel, the list goes on and on of people on the Climate Commission. Many who were named by this administration voted overwhelmingly, this is the direction the state of Maryland should go.
Right, but there were a lot of components of that commission report that did not find its way into this legislation as well, right?
But the two issues that have come under conversation of having retrofit language to start to make the kind of change we need to do to reduce our emissions, and they went as far as saying future construction should in fact be based on the 21st and 22nd century rather than the 19th century. So those two components were overwhelmingly approved by this commission that's led by the administration.
But again, this bill doesn't specifically address future construction as much as it
took out the explicit mandate that was in the original bill, but retained the intent that was included in the Climate Commission recommendation. And it also added a study by the Public Service Commission. Some of the debate has been, do we have the capacity? Now, I think that's been proven time and time again, but to ensure that everyone is relieved and we can reduce the angst, we call for the Public Service Commission to do a study about that capacity question.
I didn't see that, but is that on the end of this year, the Public Service Commission shall? Okay.
Yeah, it's actually tied, Senator, to the sentence you wrote, and I think it's at the very end.
Right.
Okay. And I think it's pretty crucial, and we thought it was important, and I don't have it.
So no, I've got it, and I appreciate that. So the beginning, again, if I go to the intent of the General Assembly, is that the state moves towards broader electrification of both existing buildings and new construction on completion of the study of this. Now, it does reference...
And not implementation, it says an intent, and then that's a period. It doesn't say it proceeds, but it says we would like to have a study if we want to go further sometime in the future. But that is up to the legislature to decide at that time.
It's very leading. I mean, it's leading. It's telling the Building Codes Administration that we are looking towards going to an all-electric building code.
Well, Senator, I hate to talk about an issue that's really not on the table because we removed it. But if we want to talk about that, almost every report has said whatever energy we use in the future. And this bill doesn't talk about those energy sources. Some people have said, why don't you put nuclear in? Well, we don't put any in, but your committee a couple of years ago passed a renewable energy portfolio. Wind, solar, geothermal, many others. And there could be more to come. But virtually all of those new existing energy sources that we want to grow in this state, and we've already made a commitment to, along with any we don't know, in all likelihood are going to be passed on through electric lines, not through pipes. And I think the intent in the Climate Commission was that if you put pipes in every new building, you're going to have to run stuff through them to make your cost. And that means we will continue to rely on natural gas, on oil, and who knows what else. And that is why the Climate Commission recommended looking to the 21st and 22nd century rather than holding on to old fossil fuels that all the science tells us is not how we should proceed in the future. It does not limit things, but that's why the intent is in there. But again, I want to reiterate, there's no mandate on new construction. That will be a decision for future legislatures of people who sit in our seats sometime in the future.
Okay. All right. That's good for now on the amendments. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you, Senator. All right, on the amendments, are there any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak? Chair recognizes the minority leader on the amendments.
Yeah, if the floor leader could yield.
Senator Pearso, Senator may proceed.
Yes, talking about the thing that Senator from District 21 mentioned about the schools. I know we discussed that in committee, and that was one of my concerns, that we were exempting them. I had thought, because it's a big bill, I thought we had exempted hospitals and nursing homes. It doesn't appear that that got in here. Is that correct?
No, there's a section in the bill that said the department should look at, when they consider developing these, looking unique situations, buildings that have effect on health and things like that. So we have a list of about 8 items, and maybe I'll find out what page that's on. But we didn't start wanting to build a specific list. We wanted the department to do that as a consideration when they set these standards by sector.
Right, right. So that's setting up a type so they can make the standards. These are exemptions.
No, but it goes beyond that. It says, let me, no, hold on. We say the department shall adopt regulations to implement this section. Regulations adopted under this section shall, subject to the items 2 and 3, include energy use intensity targets by building site type. As necessary, include special provisions or exceptions to account for building age, regional differences, unique needs of particular building or occupancy, including healthcare facilities and laboratories. So we give them direction to allow exceptions or special provisions for numbers of areas that might not be able to do it.
Senator,
hospitals came to us and said they need a backup.
What page is the senator referencing?
On the reprint, it's page 48.
Thank you, Senator.
There are a few pages before that that are non-numbered because of amendments, but on the reprint, it's page 48, lines 19 through the top of the next page. So we understood that. We heard that, Senator, that hospitals said, they didn't ask for an exemption. It was very interesting. But they said, we want some particular concern if we have to have backup systems. So we specified that in the bill.
And if I recall that section of the code, that's setting up the standards by building type. So you have, commercial buildings or churches or whatever, and they set up the standards so it's apples and apples. And then
No, but this goes further, Senator.
Right, no, I understand that.
I mean, this says the regulations shall take in consideration these things. So beyond the sector, they can get even more narrowly specific. If there's a hospital, for example, and they need a backup system, they might say, you might only have to reduce 10%. So we're giving the flexibility to the department on that.
Okay, so, but the difference is, we may only have to do 10% or 5% or 20%.
Or maybe a full exception.
Right.
I mean, we put
don't
that
know.
language in the bill.
But in the bill itself, we specifically didn't give discretion to the department. We said we're going to exempt schools, period. And then historical buildings and I think agricultural. And the biggest winner of that is the state. And we're imposing a mandate on all the private businesses and other state buildings, but the biggest exception we have in this bill is for the state does not have to do this. And
That's not true. The state does have to do it.
schools.
Schools don't have to. The state buildings do.
Right. So the biggest exception we made in this building is to exempt state schools. And so I guess the question, that answers my
They're
question.
county schools, Senator. They get some state aid, but they're county schools.
Okay. And one other question before I'll probably talk on the favorable report. On page, talking about the retrofit, I think it's page 46. There's A1, 2, and 3. A1 talks about state buildings for the covered portion. A2 talks about non-state. And then 3 talks about the department may set an alternative compliance fee if they don't meet certain standards. So I understand the non-state. What happens when the state, I guess the state is liable to pay an alternative fee if they don't meet the standards?
Yes.
And where do they get that money?
From the budget.
Okay, so the non-state taxpayers are going to get hit if they don't do it. And if the state doesn't do it, the taxpayer's going to get hit again. I just don't see the impetus on the state. It just seems a little unfair. I need that for clarification. That's all I had on the amendment.
All right. Any senators who have not yet spoken wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the senator from the 21st District on the amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry to come back on the school issue because you made your point about you decided not to have the schools participate now, might in the future. Is the way the process is going to work for everybody else, and this was your exchange also with the Senator from Montgomery County, but I just want to understand how it works, is the department is essentially going to do a study of the emissions from those who are covered, and that information will be available to the counties, and the counties will decide how to set a cap for their area? I'm not quite following the mechanics.
By 2025, they will aggregate this data of buildings over 25,000 square feet.
Yep.
They will, knowing that at the end of the day, they have to have a 30% reduction by 2035.
They is all those covered facilities.
In aggregate, they have to have a 30% reduction. They will figure out among those sectors, high-rise office buildings, multifamily buildings, shopping centers, whatever. What kind of reductions they need to reach the aggregate 30%.
Got it.
Then they'll say for sector supermarkets, the average emission now is X. And so by 2035, it's got to be X minus 30%.
And that's a state mandate, not respected to the counties.
Correct.
Okay, it's a statewide thing. Okay.
Correct.
So let me ask you this. Did you consider when you were talking in committee about exempting all these school buildings of having the study done on the school buildings by 2025, so we have the data in 2025 to see if we want to put a mandate on the schools as well?
Well, again, Senator, we didn't want to put too much of a pressure on the counties. It would have been a mandate to the counties.
No, I'm saying without a mandate. I'm saying do the study without the mandate, so by the time we get to 2025, we have the data relevant to the emissions contributions of the schools.
We didn't take that up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to get an amendment drafted to address that issue, to do the study on the schools without the mandate. So I just want to put that on the table. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Senator. All right, question is on the 10 committee amendments. Are there any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the senator from the 37th District on the amendments.
No, I'll let those go. I have an amendment and some questions afterwards. Thank you.
All right. On the committee amendments, Chair recognizes the senator from the 33rd District.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I figured out the question I wanted to ask, but one came up from the good senator from College Park. Are colleges, public and private colleges, included, or are they exempt under our schools exemption?
included.
So we have a significant number of older buildings on our state school campuses, and then we look at private schools such as Hopkins and some of these others, Loyola, that have very old buildings. So there'll be a little challenge. But you're sharing with the floor that they'll be measured against other institutions of similar size and age and things of that nature. Okay. Now, the question I actually forgot was, it appears that there's two separate goals, one for state buildings and one for public buildings. They have different percentages by certain dates. So we have put a heavier burden on state buildings to achieve it faster. Is that accurate?
Yes, and that sort of follows our committee's belief that the state should lead by example.
Sure.
Just as we're putting language in to say that their light-duty fleet, their car fleet for Department of Agriculture, Department of Environment, when they reach their life cycle, they should replace them with an electric vehicle. So throughout the bill, we think the government should lead by example and help move the rest of the state along.
And just as a general observation of this issue, to the Budget Committee over the next 7 or 10 years, we may have to be allocating a little more money to achieve that goal.
Understood.
The last thing I have for you is we took out, or I'm sorry, did we take out the fee for failure to achieve the building emission standards?
No, there's a non-compliance fee.
Okay.
So in other words, if a building says, heck with you, we're not going to do anything, and they want to contribute to worsening the climate crisis, when there's a plan in place, there's a non-compliance fee that will go to in a fund to help other sectors achieve the reduction.
I don't recall, I apologize, I try to pay attention in committee. Was there any discussion on how the fee was going to be established and what department would be collecting it?
I believe it's Department of the Environment. It doesn't specify exactly where it's established by NDE.
Fee will be established by MDE?
Yes.
Yeah. Now,
they will establish it, I assume, through regulation.
Okay, very good. And my last question about this,
You sound like Columbo.
Hey, I'm from New Jersey, what can I tell you? Mr. Chairman, the fee, so we have a non-compliant building. They gave us the proverbial no thank you. Is this fee, do you imagine, because I don't think the bill talks about it, a one-time fee, or would it be ongoing every year for their non-compliance?
I'm checking with counsel.
No problem.
Presumably every year.
Okay, so...
But again, the department will have to promulgate regulations that address that issue.
Sure.
I
So
mean, essentially, look, we don't want in our state business saying, you know what, it's a cost of doing business, and just ignoring it. Now, will the money, and the fee has not been set yet, be enough to offset their non-compliance and assist other people in doing retrofitting or getting clean energy cars or whatever it is? We don't know, but we think we have to move our state, and hopefully with our state and other states joining us, moving our nation to doing something, because if we say there's always tomorrow, we're going to run out of tomorrows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. President, on this specific issue, I can imagine a building that is underutilized, maybe a 50% capacity. And they don't have the cash flow to make these huge investments in roof, windows, insulation, heat pumps. And then they start getting fined, and it only makes this situation even worse. So I'm very concerned about this particular issue. I thank you for allowing me the time.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak on the committee amendments? On the committee amendments? If not, the chair recognizes the senator from the 36th district.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could just follow up with, thank you, Mr. President, if I could follow up with the chairman on the previous line of questioning.
Senator may proceed.
when going back to this alternative compliance fee, it does mention that the department will use something called the social cost of greenhouse gases adopted by the department or the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Do we know what that is?
Yeah, the department has calculated what the downstream cleanup would be and what they call the social cost of carbon that affects us. It's not a figure set in statute forever. Right now, the EPA is estimating $50 a ton. So in other words, that is built into it in terms of you can't just take a snapshot and not be concerned about or account for the emissions and the effect they have on public health, on asthma, on people, or other cleanups that have to take place because of the emissions. So that's generally been an accepted term, and we benchmark it against the EPA's number, I believe.
So do we know that that fee, is that, for instance, prorated? So for instance, if somebody's goal was to be at 30%, and they got to 25%, are they paying the entire compliance fee, or are they paying, you know, a portion of that based on not getting that last 5%?
I think we're mixing apples and oranges. I'm not sure the social cost is the compliance fee. I don't think.
It just says that the department may not set an page. This one doesn't have a page number. It's like 47 maybe. The second part of 47. But it says the department may not set an alternative compliance fee that is less than the social cost of greenhouse gases. So it somehow is relating back to that number and setting a number.
In this case, it sets the floor of at least that number, which currently stands at about $50 per ton. So it's going to be on the tonnage that's emitted. I mean, the end goal here is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions however we can do it. You know, about 5 or 6 years ago, the Empire State Building, one of the second or third largest, highest buildings in New York City, went through a major renovation. And they were approached and said, can you do it in a green way that also gets you return on investment? And the owners said, yeah, if we can get a return on investment. So in other words, the marginal difference that it took to renovate, I don't know if it was tens of millions or hundreds of millions to do the whole building, they got their return on investment, and then they're going to actually be saving money in their lower energy costs. So
I'm very familiar with that case study, by the way, because it's a very iconic building. And they did that very specifically as well, just so that example could be used in places like this. So there was,
and I think that's pretty impressive. I mean, one of the things they did, for example, and not to digress too much, when they redid their elevators, they did them in such a way that they're capturing the energy from the up and down of the elevators to use to heat and do other things in the building. And I think this whole bill is trying to push creativity and new jobs, and that's why we have a green bank of $5 million, so some of these smart, high-tech people who want to do clean energy can do those kind of innovative things. So at the end of the day, not only will investors, when they retrofit, get their return on their marginal additional investment, but then they're going to save money because of a lower energy cost, and at the same time helping the environment.
Okay, just to follow back up on the last question about the compliance fees.
I'm sorry, the fee doesn't kick in until 2035.
2035, okay. You mentioned earlier that if a state building is not in compliance, the state would have to pay that fee, correct?
It's presumed, you know.
Okay. I guess that will make this question more difficult. The fee is put into a fund. Obviously, the buildings that are having difficulty getting to those goals can borrow money, get granted money from that. Where does the compliance fee go?
I'm glad you raised that, Senator. We understand when retrofitting, it might come at a time when a building owner was going to be renovating anyway, right? And so maybe they'll replace an old furnace with a heat pump. We want to make this easy, and we're letting them choose how to do this. But we have created a transitional task force of really stellar people, and you can look at that list, who are responsible, objective, know money and finance, and we have given them the authority to come back and develop recommendations for what type of state incentives and support might be needed if people can't get a decent return on their investment. And they're going to come back to this body, and I can't remember if it was 23, 24, 25, I'll find that out, to do just what you're saying. We are 23. So we are not saying you're going to do this come heck or high water. We understand there might be situations where we need incentives and support to do that. So they're going to come back with those recommendations. Might there be some cost to it? There may be. We're going to decide on that. And ultimately, as you know and has been referred to, there's a sunset on this section of the bill for the full net neutral by 2040. So there are a number of checks and balances and reflection points. So if there's not the support, or we find out those buildings won't get a fairly reasonable return on their investment, and then the state has to decide if we're going to give the incentives to help them get there. And if there's no to those answers in 2029, the legislature can say, you know what, bad idea, and we'll let it sunset. So we've tried to be balanced and reasonable in putting things in place that we can achieve this, but in a thoughtful way.
And I was just going to say, I think you started off being very balanced and reasonable when you acknowledge that a lot of this equipment does have to be replaced, does have a life cycle to it. And I think there'd be a lot more people comfortable with this legislation if we referred back to the buildings a little bit more individually, that when life cycle of the equipment comes to its term, that then it is replaced rather than an arbitrary date that this body has set.
Senator, all I can tell you is I think I've learned, and I think many of us have learned, people get comfortable in their existing comfort zone. You know, if they don't have to do something and they don't have to look at other ways of doing things, they don't do it. And I'm going to digress for a moment. We put money in for schools, since we talked about schools, to go to being net neutral. Because a lot of the people in those central offices and those planners know how to build schools the old way. But we think once people do it once, they're going to do it a second time and a third time and a fourth time. And just waiting till people are ready to move isn't going to help the flooding in our state or in our nation. And again, we're a small state. We're not going to solve it all by ourselves. But there are creative things happening all across the country. As I mentioned, New York City, 10 million people. They actually have one of the most aggressive transitions in the country. Washington State's done things. California's done things. So just waiting till they have to renovate. In other words, we're going to give credit to those people who have had a vision and have started to think green economically of how they can transform their building. But if we say, oh, we'll wait till you have to do a major renovation of X millions of dollars, you know, people have to be pulled and pushed a little bit, or we're not going to address this challenge, and we're going to be hearing it on the back end as this climate crisis continues.
Well, I may agree with some of that, but I think in many of these situations, in mandating that this occurs, you know, most of the owners of these buildings have occupants or tenants that are there. And as these costs go up to have to meet these goals, those costs get passed on to those that rent or lease the building as well too. So when they're under the gun of a time frame is very different than if they have a preventative maintenance type of schedule that they can go forward with on all of their equipment.
Mr. Senator, we're talking 2035 is the first line. I think we're in 2022. that's 13 years away. And then the ultimate one is 2040, and there's actually a sunset before that comes into play. So, you know, look, no one wants to pay more money. I think we have a situation now with the Ukraine. No one wants to pay higher gas fees, but every poll has shown that people are willing to do that. And the President of the United States and countries in Western Europe have said, for the short-term support of the Ukraine, we're going to do that. So I think, you know, there are trade-offs all the time. And I think moving forward on addressing climate change, we'll have some trade-offs.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, on the amendments, the committee amendments, any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the Favorable Committee report as amended. Chair recognizes the minority leader on the report.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I wanted to acknowledge the noble goal of this bill. Additionally, I want to thank those who worked on this bill, as we all want to be good stewards of our environment and deal with climate change. I was hoping that we could present a bipartisan climate solution, but unfortunately I rise in opposition. We see that national and local energy policies can have drastic impacts on gas prices, utility prices, food prices, and almost every other area of our life. Besides utility increases, this bill will create mandated retrofits costing up to $10,000 per family and mandates for an alternative energy tax. We don't need another $10,000 energy tax, especially on low income and working families. Not to mention, if the state does not meet their standards, the taxpayers will have to pick up those tabs as well. When this bill was presented, it was presented as bold and aggressive. The question we must wrestle with today when dealing with aggressive energy mandates that hurt Marylanders is the squeeze worth the juice? And if there's one thing you take from my comments, this is this. Our main opposition to this bill is that it places a harsh financial burden on the back of Marylanders while failing to deliver any measurable environmental benefits to save our planet, or Maryland for that matter. During the floor report, we were told we need this bill because climate change is creating a threat to our very existence. Thousands of fires in California, severe storms and floods, Maryland losing crops due to saltwater intrusion, Ellicott City and Annapolis flooding, and more examples. Despite the passionate and sincere appeal, the harsh reality is this climate solution bill will not solve or stop a single problem mentioned yesterday, much less save the planet. Let me repeat that. The harsh reality is this climate solution bill will not solve or stop a single problem mentioned yesterday, much less save the planet. If it did and it were that easy, I would be the first to co-sponsor this bill. Everyone knows that Maryland is too small and part of a much bigger world to make any measurable impact. If we want to address this issue in a meaningful way, we need to focus on solutions that are global, national, or at a minimum, a regional level. We heard that Maryland could be the tip of the spear in dealing with climate change if we pass this bill. If being so aggressive only makes us a symbolic tip of the spear, we must ask if this is worth the financial burden being placed on our residents. Frankly, I'm not interested in symbolism. If we're asking Marylanders to sacrifice more, I am interested in results, and this bill does not provide them. One thing I teach my children is to concentrate on controlling what you can control and don't waste time on things you cannot control. The Maryland General Assembly cannot control global or national climate issues. Our focus should be on good climate policies that help Maryland. The narrative that we can save the planet if Maryland enacts these burdensome and aggressive state policy is false advertising. That being said, I think some of these policies in the bill are appropriate, good climate policies, and worthy of passing. But for the more onerous and burdensome policies in this bill, the squeeze is definitely not worth the juice. Finally, the Republican caucus stands ready to work in a bipartisan manner to craft a climate solution bill that provides a balanced approach that considers the financial impact on Marylanders, improves our environment, and addresses climate change. We were disappointed that this bill was presented as all or nothing approach. There are many climate solutions that we support, but we are given one vote on a 50-plus page bill that throws everything into it, including the proverbial climate kitchen sink. And for those reasons, I cannot support this bill.
All right, the questions on the favorable committee report. Chair recognizes the President Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to ask if the previous speaker, the minority leader, would yield.
Will the minority leader yield? Appears so. Senator may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've been listening with interest to this debate. I'm not on the standing committee, so don't have a lot of background on the subject and have heard a lot of information today, but something you said in your comments I didn't understand, and I want to make sure I heard you correctly. Did you say that the cost was $10,000 per family?
I said up to.
Can
It
you
probably
help
could go
me?
over.
Can you unpack that number for me?
Sure. Marylanders are struggling with gas prices, with food prices, and this bill puts more on. So what happens in the bill, I know it's a large bill and we have to dive down into the little parts of it. There's a retrofit portion of this bill, and it says you have to retrofit it by and get certain energy standards. Some things you can do is replace windows, replace furnaces, all those kind of things. I can tell you just window replacements, I had an estimate in my house, it was $15,000. Now it depends on the quality windows, and that depends on the energy efficiency. So this is the type of things people will have to pay. Some will be a lot more than $10,000, but the estimates that I've been talking with people, it will be at least $10,000.
Okay, I was just curious because I hadn't seen any of those estimates. It sounds like just kind of a general, the number you have for windows on your house.
No,
your personal house. Can you explain a little bit more, or do you have some documentation to kind of support that, or it's just a general estimation?
We heard testimony during the committee of how much it would cost. Now, there was some debating saying, well, it wouldn't cost this much, it would cost more. The problem is the bill doesn't specify it. It says you're going to have to do it. We don't care how much it's going to do. You have to do it, and if you don't meet it, we're going to put a tax on you, and it has to be at least with this social and EPA standard. I think it's like $50 a square foot or whatever, which would be about $10,000 minimum. So there's a lot of money going out of the door. This is a big tax, the wrong time. So that's why I oppose it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. President, if I could I ask the floor leader to yield?
Will the floor leader yield?
Thank you, Mr. Floor
Senator may
Leader.
proceed.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. President. So I just heard some references to numbers and expectations and some things that are a little troubling for me. I want to make sure that the actual message gets out to those who might be listening. Can you help me and answer my question?
Unless you have a residence that's over 25,000 square feet, this isn't going to affect you. So I don't have any homes like that in my district. So if it's a matter of being concerned about replacing your windows in your home, you're not affected by this bill. I know I hate to let facts get in the way, but it is only 25,000 square feet or greater.
Okay, so the reference to an individual family wasn't necessarily consistent with what the bill actually does.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr.
All right, Chair recognizes Senator from the Minority Whip on the favorable report.
Just very briefly, Mr. President, I wondered if I could ask the minority leader a question about this issue.
Senator, hold on. All right, we could go back and forth on this all the time. If the senator wants to make a point, the senator can make a point, and we'll
I think
go
it's
back.
I'll yield to the minority leader. Isn't it true that how does this bill deal with multifamily homes?
Well, I think that's an important issue because we heard the discussion here that it would just affect 25,000 square feet, and we don't have those big a built house. Now, that's a mansion, right? The problem with the 25,000 foot, it brings in the multi-family houses, the low income, the moderate income, the working families that are all in these houses, and that's where the big cost comes into these people. It's not about these McMansions. So facts do get in the way sometimes. What we're talking about are the multi-family houses. In most everybody's district, you have them where people are going to be required to pay this probably up to $10,000 or more. So just for that clarification, thank you.
All right, Chair recognizes the senator from the 35th District on the report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the bill sponsor yield for a question, and then I'll have a little statement.
Will the floor leader yield for a question? Appears so. Senator may proceed.
Committee Chair will.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
To defend the committee's bill.
Yes, sir. And just one thing that I didn't get to ask in committee that I would like to ask after we've heard this debate today. Originally, when the bill came in, you had the part for the new construction, and then you had the retrofitting part.
Correct.
And as the amendments came through, the retrofit part was left in, but the new building was more or less amended out.
Correct.
So my question is, why was it done that way, and why not the opposite way, where it would seem harder to change up these existing buildings? Wouldn't it have been easier to say going forward with new construction that we would do it? Why was it done that way, not the opposite?
Well, I think when that was removed, I think you supported that amendment to remove it.
Senator, let's refrain from talking about committee votes,
That was a slip.
please.
And I would have supported amendment to remove the other part too, by the way, but it wasn't brought up.
And, okay, it's begging other questions. Senator, the greatest amount of pushback, reaction, particularly to a lot of misinformation, was that the sky was going to fall if we required all new construction to be electric. Now, the modeling company, that the Climate Commission, which again, majority of its members were from the Hogan administration, voted for it because the modeling company said, the consultant who does modeling, econometric modeling, said it will be cheaper for new construction for homes, for multifamily housing, for office buildings. They also said it would be cheaper in the retrofitting because of the savings on energy costs. So in all scenarios, and I didn't know this company, I think they're from California, I think, they said it would be cheaper. But a lot of people felt that I wouldn't be able to have choice to have gas piped in to heat my house. Now, I didn't get a lot of constituents saying they cared how the house was heated, whether it was from through electricity or through a gas pipe. But there was a lot of opposition to that, and people got nervous. And as I said, one industry who could potentially lose some of their profits lobbied very hard against that section. So after hearing people on the floor from both parties on the concern, we decided to do the study. So the Public Service Commission, which again is majority of the members are appointed by this administration, let them do the study to confirm or show the fallacies of some of the rumors being spread around. So we decided to do that, and from some people in the private sector, they were more concerned about the going forward than going backwards. And we are having a section in there to talk about some state support if in fact the retrofit gets too expensive or too complicated. So,
the state support was a $5 million level?
No, they're coming back with recommendations because, look, I'm not in the place to say what is a reasonable return on investment. In other words, if I have to renovate a building and it's going to take an extra $5 million to reach my 30% reduction, if it takes me 5 years or 8 years or 10 years, what is the right horizon? I don't know that. And we're going to let these experts, business people, all kinds of people who are familiar with this, make that decision. Because once that horizon is met, they're going to be making money. But if for some reason they're not going to get benefits from it, and it's going to be onerous, and it's going to take them 10 or 20 or 25 years to recoup it, we've got to come up with a plan. So we're going to have these experts and business people come up and come back to this legislature with recommendations if in fact incentives are needed in some of those cases.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, kind of my thoughts on the bill.
On the report, Senator may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we heard, especially yesterday, that the word was used, imminent threat caused by climate change. We heard about flooding on Coastal Highway. I got to go to my first Mako convention last year, and I know that a lot of people were concerned they wouldn't be able to get to the event held by the distinguished senator from District 7 at the rope walk because the roads flooded as he heads out. Also, we heard of flooding in Annapolis. We heard of saltwater intrusion on crop ground. And also, honestly, last summer, during a couple of bad storms, I was actually driving a fire truck through some of these flood small creeks right in my home community at Level. So got to see some of this, firsthand as we were serving the constituents there. But with all those, we've identified a problem in this issue that's going on, but passing this bill won't stop any of those things because Maryland is just too small of a state to even put a dent into this. This bill will not change Maryland's environmental climate. In theory, it's a good thing, trying to save the environment and leave something better for our children, but in practicality, I just don't see how it works. We talk about the 25,000 square feet covered buildings. That includes multifamily and apartment complexes. And as they look to reach these goals at replacing windows or adding solar panels, changing their heat pumps, these costs are going to be passed on potentially to these tenants who are already struggling right now with higher energy costs. The bills, and there's no end in sight right now. This started well before the Ukraine-Russia issue that we're seeing, but that's exacerbated. It made it a lot worse, and it's getting worse and worse. So I have real concerns that this would only make things harder for Maryland's working families. And also the intent language of the bill, talking about the, more electrification. Where's the electricity going to come from? It's going to come from other states, and how are they producing electric? I mean, we don't have any say over that, right? What Ohio or New York, Pennsylvania, these other states do. And you look at other alternatives like, solar. If you have a great increase in solar panels, that sounds good in theory, but I have a concern if we only have so many acres that are open in the state. Would that possibly encroach on prime and productive farm ground? Hopefully not, but that could lead to issues like food insecurity. I mean, we only have one thing they're not making any more of. You can buy a new tractor, you can buy a new car, but they're not making any more ground. So my final point is still on that retrofit part of the bill. It'll cost more money for the building owners, and really what are we accomplishing? What are the citizens of Maryland really getting out of this bill other than possibly higher rent and utility costs? This may be a feel-good bill, but I think it could be a very bad bill for the pocketbooks of our citizens. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, on the report, Chair recognizes the Senator from District 10.
Colleagues, I'm going to just take a brief moment, but let me say this. Maryland is a relatively small state, but one of the things we can do is to be a role model for other states. Clearly, when you read, as I did yesterday in national news, that the North Pole has the snow melting, and we are going to feel that right down here on the eastern shore of Maryland. When the sea rises more than is now the case, we have got to model. We ought to be one of the first states, we're the first state in many regards, to show the rest what is possible, a way forward, because we are going to need the rest of these United States. But if everybody plays chicken and sits back, it's not going to work. And if you're worried about what kind of tax rates your grandchildren will pay, they won't have a place on this planet to live. This is now serious. So I agree. We are too small to save the whole world by ourselves. And we got the problem with the rainforest disappearing in South America. But we are messing the planet up so fast that children already born may not be able to be adults walking around as we do. Maybe they'll need to be on stilts if the soggy ground can hold them up. Let's be a role model. Let's do what's right. clearly we must save the planet or forget about all your progeny and all your grandchildren. It's empty words to talk about how you love them if you're going to leave them with a planet that can't sustain human life. I won't say more. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from District 1.
Thank you, Mr. President. Floor Leader, if I could ask a question.
Will the floor leader yield? Appears so. Senator may proceed.
I think I probably beat most people in here to the punch. We built our house in the 70s, and it's all electric. How about that? And it works real well, except when electric goes off. But I do have the option because I have a natural gas line runs right by the house. I could hook on the natural gas. I have a fireplace, so I do have a backup if I need the heat. But my question deals with school buses. I'm looking at the section in here. We were second on the bill, B&T, and your staff came in and explained everything. I asked a question about the school buses, and I'm reading, I think I have the reprint here. My question was, if we go to electric school bus, my understanding, you probably have more information on this, they cost somewhere around $300,000 plus for a bus. My county's a poor county, or all the counties I represent are poor counties. Most of them are small contractors that contract out. I don't have any idea how they're going to pay for these. Someone in here told me that they thought they were around $900,000. But she also said, ended up, which was a little different because you commented and it's somewhat written in here, that we want to move to electric buses. But it's all contingent on federal funds. The federal funds would help pay the whole cost, I'm not sure what, of the school buses. But we're also talking about zero emissions. But she then went on to say that basically the final decision is up to the local boards of ed on what to do, whether federal funding's there or not. So my question is, the way this is written in here, when we get to that point, and we're talking zero emissions, you know, there are other fuels that are zero emissions, not electric, hydrogen. I just read the other day that they're producing a product out of natural gas that produces gasoline, which is zero emissions. Will they be eligible to buy those kind of buses versus a total electric bus?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. And I found the page. I received help. It says net zero emission vehicle. It doesn't say electric. That's on page 23, line between 8 and 9 on the reprint.
Get down to E. It talks about setting up infrastructure sufficient to support school buses that are zero emission vehicles. And then it said somewhere in here about electric, work with the county boards and private school bus contractors to develop electric vehicle infrastructure sufficient to handle the buses.
Right, that doesn't, but if you go up a little earlier, it says
on 2?
On 23, in 7, 8, and 9, the use of any school bus that is not a zero emissions vehicle unless the school bus has an in-service date of such and such a date. So it doesn't preclude another type of net zero emission vehicle, but it's explicit in saying, because a lot of the things coming online are electric, to do the electric infrastructure. And again, it is conditioned on the federal money and also the availability of the buses. So if there are other ones that, and zero emission vehicles are defined in the transportation article. And so it does not, zero emissions does not equate with electric.
Okay, well, a little gobbledygook here, but as long as you
Senator,
say that,
it does that because people, some of the folks, in fact, some of the contractors from Western Maryland said, okay, we're getting federal money, but what about the electric charging stations? Yeah. So we wanted to be explicit about having money to do that as well.
Because, but it does say, if I read it right here in this somewhere, that because all these vehicles that use different fuels are impacted differently by cold weather, and the cold weather part of the state. You know, I'm not sure how well electric buses would work there versus some of the other, but
No, but
you
Senator,
answered my question.
But your follow-up question is also appropriate. And so the language we have in the bill says the department determines that no available zero-emission vehicle meets the performance requirements for the county board's use. So we want to make it flexible for that very reason, Senator.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, on the report, Chair recognizes the senator from the 36th District.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, just to address the concerns of the Senate President Pro Tem, I think this bill is just full of additional cost opportunities or additional opportunities where costs may rise. It might be specifically to housing that rents go up as a result of a multifamily building having to make upgrades to HVAC, windows, lightings. People will certainly pay more for goods and materials if rents have to go up in these buildings, again, as a result of these upgrades, or maybe even assessments for condominium associations and things of that nature. But one place for sure, which will be measurable, that costs will go up, is through the Empower section of this bill. And Mr. Chairman, could I just ask a couple questions on that, please?
Will the floor yield? Senator may proceed.
Empower, just again to make sure everybody is completely aware, is paid for specifically by the ratepayers. So right now the estimates are that a typical Marylander that uses 1,000 kilowatts an hour is paying between $6.19 and $8.42 a month. And that is to achieve what we have looked at as a 2% reduction in energy usage, either through just using less energy or through efficiency programs. So just recently in 2018, we increased the program for another 3 years, and we've looked at this in 3-year segments. This bill goes above and beyond that, where it not only goes another 3 years, but then it goes out into perpetuity, I guess, but 2027. But the amounts increased. So you've gone from 2% to 2.25% to 2.5%, 2.75%. I guess my question is, was there any type of analysis performed to see if these types of savings and efficiencies are even attainable?
Well, as you are aware, this was in the bill that was passed by this body last year. This is not a new concept. And you can probably share, because your committee has dealt with this issue for many years and you're more of an expert than I am, but it's my understanding that this money in the Empower is used to reinvest, particularly low income, for more energy efficiency. So as I understand the whole concept, it's to invest to lower people's bills, that we're making an upfront investment that's going to pay for itself many times over in the out years. So if we want to up that money to have more insulation, more efficient windows, programmable thermostats, whatever are being used in these low and moderate income homes, it seems to me, one, it's saving energy bills, and it's also helping utilize and rely on fossil fuels, which we're trying to reduce anyway if we want to take on the climate crisis. And the final point, it's my understanding there is a work group, either a public service commission, that's even is contemplating being even bolder in making changes to the Empower. So this is a very modest change, which I can tell you PEPCO signed off on last year and had no problem with, if that matters.
When you say last year is when we renewed it for another 3 years.
No, in the last year in the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2021.
Right, I forgot about that one. I think the explanation was it almost appeared as though you made that sound like grants are provided through this Empower, where what it really is, it's programs that are initiated through the Public Service Commission that individuals can participate in it. So mainly people recognize Empower as the light bulb program, right? When we've changed all the light bulbs out. Then we've looked at it through refrigerators, where we would be able to replace older refrigerators with more efficient refrigerators. As you mentioned, thermostats, okay? But it's not a grant program where somebody says, hey, I need to get new insulation or replace the windows, and therefore I'll come to you. It has to be a broader program.
Agreed, and I never said anything grant. And if the Public Service Commission has vetted the program and thinks it's going to lead to energy efficiency, while I haven't agreed with all their decisions, I totally respect their developing the programs that are going to help our society and our state.
Well, I understand their testimony was that the Public Service Commission is concerned with the availability of Empower programs to remain cost effective in the future. So in other words, you can raise the goals all you want, but again, this is being paid for by the ratepayers. So again, you use more electricity, you pay more into this program. So it's more not just achieving these numbers, it's more, is it cost effective to charge ratepayers this much money to go into programs that do not see as much of a measurable result?
Well, Senator, you know, I guess I see this as a bridge to the report from the Public Service Commission, and I guess that'll eventually go through your committee on making possibly wholesale changes to the Empower Act. And I think they're also going to address the issue of fuel switching rather than just changing more efficient furnaces to move to heat pumps and other things. So I see this as a short-term bridge, and I look forward to and am encouraged by what I hear coming out of PSC and your committee on reforming Empower.
Okay, but I just want to remind everybody that this program is paid for solely by the ratepayers. So whether you benefit from some of these programs or not, you are paying into the program. And again, the percentages of saving increase well beyond what we have looked at previously in the Financing Committee. Mr. Chairman, just one more question, if you could, just a different topic, but obviously Empower doesn't deal with greenhouse gas emissions, but a lot of this bill does. Currently, 25% reduction from the 2006 levels to 2020 level. That's where we are right now. So obviously we're past 2020. Did we achieve that, or where did we stand in trying to reach that goal?
Yes, we achieved that.
Did we get to 26, 30, 35? Do you know? Just because the next questions continue to increase this.
As I recall, the commission, which people look to in some areas and reject in other areas, so I guess we're picking and choosing what we want to take from them. They said that we met it in 2020.
Right.
We had a 40% goal by 2030. They believe we're going to achieve that. And in fact, the Climate Commission, led by the Secretary of the Environment, said he thinks we can reach 50%. Now, you know, I don't know his judgment. He said he shifted from 40 to 50, and this bill calls for 60%. Right. And we think we can achieve that, and we should achieve that.
Okay, so that goes to, now that with the bill, it goes to 60% by 2030. And then it goes, we kind of change terminology. We go from percentages of reduction to all of a sudden net zero. Is net zero and 100% reduction the same?
It's not quite. Net zero means you are creating as much as you're using. Okay. And so it might not be exactly the same as 100% from 2006. It just means that by using different strategies and tools, solar, for example, or geothermal, it allows for offsets, essentially. So it's puts and takes, I think is the word that's used. So the first one, the 60%, is a reduction from the 2006 number, and that was benchmarked. The 2045 talks about, after you look at the puts and takes, it'll be net zero.
Sources and sinks, right? Sources and sinks. That's
You're more familiar than I am.
But I'm just asking.
I'm just a simple country boy.
Yeah. So in order to achieve that, as you said, we have to be able to balance that. Do we know that there's enough carbon sinks to allow us to get to a full offset or a net zero? I know we've pushed this out a period of time, but do we have to achieve goals on the other side?
Yeah, first of all, Senator, there's also a sunset on that 2045 net zero. Not in this bill. Well, I think that's in law now. I think we didn't touch that.
Okay, back to my question.
Checking on that.
Okay,
I don't have a specific answer to that.
Okay.
You know, I think the President of the United States, they use a 50% figure because it's an average of all 50 states. And I believe Maryland should be at 60% because there are some states that are going to be recalcitrant. So I think the 60% fits in with the President's goal of 50%. I believe he also calls for a 2045 net zero. Okay. You know, and look, there's more technologies coming on every day. You know, battery, the effective battery of maintaining that energy for longer periods of time or transporting it. So, you know, that's 18 years away, or I'm sorry, 23 years away. So there are numbers now with clean energy that absorb and can create it. We expect there to be more.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, again, if we go back to your initial comments yesterday, we talked about the existential threats and things of that nature. I think a lot of us are concerned. Does this legislation, if it's passed the way that it is, does this make a dent in what we're trying to achieve, or is this kind of a statement? Hey, we're a leader. We're going to be out there first and say we're going to do something, but the climate change and the warming and whatever's happening is going to go on its way, and we're just going to spend a lot of money trying to achieve something that might not be achieved.
Senator, I think it is a fair question. I think it's a fundamental question. I really do. I'm being totally honest with you. Is this going to stop the flooding in downtown Annapolis? It's not. But I can tell you this, that when we passed the first climate bill, I think in 2009, and the second one in 2016, and soon after, this legislator spoke of setting that goal, which was a 40% reduction, I believe, the governor asked the state to sign on to the Climate Alliance. That was a multi-state kind of operation. And this preceded, I believe, the Paris Accords. There was not federal law to do this, but President Obama felt emboldened because of actions taken by states like California, by Maryland, by Washington, by the initiative of the Climate Alliance that Governor Hogan was a part of, to go and debate and negotiate to have international standards. We have to meet those international standards. And as the chairwoman of finance said, if we're waiting for the next state, the next nation to do it, nobody moves. It's meaningless. And I would say this, that there's not a message going to fall down from God to say, do this tomorrow. And there's not one action that the planet can take. It really is starting with small steps. It really is. You know, could this bill have had additional things? Yes, but there would have been more pushback from people, your side of the aisle, maybe my side of the aisle. But this nation is not going to be able to go to the international table if they're not showing results. And the federal government and Congress is not going to pass this because of the laws of filibuster and a lot of other things. So the only way for us to move forward is to do what we can do in our state and hope that California, that's obviously economic motivator for the whole economy. I think it's the 5th largest economy in the world. And Delaware and Virginia and Michigan and everyone else moves, and then maybe our Congress will move. But the other countries are not going to want to do it unless we're starting to get results. You know, and I hate to fall on the old tropes of, a journey starts with one step, but in some ways that is in fact what we're talking about here. And I can't point to a nexus that we in 5 years do this, water's going to be a little lower on Coastal Highway next time there's a big storm. But the storms are coming. You know, and I mentioned yesterday sea level rise. DNR has a map, interactive map. If sea level rise goes up 6 inches or a foot or a foot and a half, and you could look at your community and see if it turns yellow or red or whatever. But for the longest time, they had a separate one for storm surges. But they didn't have one that did both together. And that's the problem, Senator, that we have sea level rise, we're having more severe storms that are documented. Virtually every scientist in the world says that's true. So if you put together more severe storms, you put together sea level rise, it ain't a pretty picture. And there is no other body, the UN is not taking the lead on this. Someone has to act because, you know, I don't want to be, you know, there are no tomorrows, but this is going to get worse, and our children and grandchildren are going to ask, what did you do? And I think this is more than symbolic. I think they're the kind of steps we need to do, and hopefully other states and our nation will adopt the same steps. I mean, that's the best I can tell you.
And I understand that, and I think many of us believe that, again, we need some other states possibly to go along with us on this. But specifically with this bill, do you foresee measurable results? I know a lot of this is based on modeling and, you know, if we do these types of things, therefore we have reduced. But do we actually see measurable results?
Senator, again, you know, I appreciate and respect your questions because I've had the same questions. Last year, the Department of the Environment developed a plan, as they were required to do by this legislature, of how we do reductions. And one of my criticisms of that plan, and I shared this with the secretary, is that it said it had a list of, it was 120 pages, maybe longer with the appendices, and it listed 40, 60, 70 recommendations, but it didn't quantify the reduction in each of those recommendations. And that's one of the things we call for in the new plan, so we can quantify that of how much reduction will you know, having 200,000 more electric cars do, or electric buses, or investing in technology, or having this bank that we will have new creative people with technology, innovative technology. We don't know yet what the results and the benefits are going to be from that. So we're investing in the future because that becomes a challenge if we don't start caring about the future. So I don't have an answer for you of how many tons of reduction. Obviously, Department of Environment can tell you what a 60% reduction from 2006 is in the amount of tonnage. Let me make one other point, and I don't want to go on too long. The first 25% reduction from the original bill, most of that reduction came about because of the market. Because coal was expensive, oil was expensive, and they moved to natural gas. It wasn't because of actions the state, and that we proceeded to do. We can't be sure of how the markets are going to play out, although the cost of oil is going up and even natural gas is going up. We don't know how that plays out. And over the last 7.5 years, we've gone for very low-hanging fruit. We try to go to the next step. You know, Do we want controversy? Absolutely not. We're not looking for trouble here. And the governor has stayed away from controversial things. I mean, there's a bill in our committee about a carbon tax. You know, that's being debated nationally and among people here. You know, we haven't taken that bill up. In fact, it was in your committee last year.
Right.
So we're dealing with what we can deal with. We think it's going to make us more than a dent. It's more than symbolic, and it shows our commitment, and hopefully it's going to have the reduction in greenhouse gases.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President, I know we're going to be offering some amendments later, so I'll wait till then. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right, are there any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak? Chair recognizes the senator from the 38th District on the report.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I could ask the floor leader a couple questions.
Floor to yield. Senator may proceed.
Sure.
Hello, Mr. Chair. There's been a couple references to the Hogan administration and the commission, I think implying that they endorsed or supported the legislation as is. My understanding, and I just wanted to clarify that this was more in concept as opposed to supporting or endorsing an actual piece of legislation.
No, you're absolutely right. They did not endorse this piece of legislation. In 99% of their testimony from every agency in front of our committee, they always submit a letter of information. So they have rarely supported or opposed any legislation, not just this year, but for the last 7.5 years. What I said is that they voted for the Climate Commission element of this bill. They voted for requiring, not asking, requiring all future construction to be electric and not lay gas pipes. That was an explicit recommendation from the Climate Commission, which a majority of its members were from the Hogan administration. And they endorsed explicitly the retrofitting that's in this bill. So they did not endorse the whole bill, absolutely not. If that was implied, that was a misnomer. They endorsed this retrofitting and what was in the original bill on the future construction.
But my understanding that there was not a separate vote on sole source electric where they were not given an opportunity to vote on a concept where you would have other energy providers to be part of the climate solutions in reducing emissions.
I can't get in the head of Secretary Bartenfelder or Secretary Grumbles or any of the other people who voted for this. This section of their report and proposal was studied for 2 years. It was more energy and time, speaking of energy, was spent on that proposal than anything else. They helped develop the recommendations. They hired the company to do the modeling. They did all of this. So all I can tell you, I have the vote in front of me. I think it was 22-2 or 23-2. So they explicitly endorsed those pieces of the bill.
I understand your point, but I'm trying to make the point that they did not vote on specific legislation. And as a matter of fact, the governor just put out a statement, I think, to try to clarify this since it's been mentioned. I think there's an understanding that we share the goal of protecting our environment and combating climate change. So all of us share that goal, but right now, and the governor points out that Maryland leads the nation in reducing greenhouse gas emissions while growing our economy, but that this bill right now would have devastating consequences across the board. So I just wanted to clarify that since there were some references, and I believe, again, that we can have all of our energy providers part of the solution in reducing emissions. So thank you, Mr.
Senator,
Chair.
the 11 of the 13 members of the administration voted for these explicit proposals to require, not suggest, not intend, but explicitly with a date certain to require all future construction to be electric 11 of the members, I can read you the names of the secretaries who voted for it. I don't think they said, oops, I made a mistake. They know exactly what they were voting for. You know, we can change our mind a year later or 8 months later, but it was clear they were the part of the prime movers on this. They listened to the science. They listened to the people who modeled the costs. They listened to all the players at the table, including a representative from either NIOP or the building industry, who also voted for this. And so the administration was foursquare behind this explicit recommendation. They might not have endorsed this bill, and I don't know what the governor will do if and when it gets to his desk, but when it came to the Climate Commission, they knew what they were doing and they voted in favor of it.
And I'm just going to end my point just to say there's a difference when you're part of a commission and supporting concepts and goals as opposed to supporting and endorsing actual legislation with deadlines and other impacts on consumers across the board. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the Minority Whip on the report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think it's been a very good debate, an interesting discussion. It's a very far-reaching bill, and you can say that whether you support the bill or maybe don't support the bill. It's far-reaching. I wondered if I'd like to make a couple comments, and I may ask the floor leader to yield for questions, but I'll make a couple comments first. I think, number one, and my colleague from the Eastern Shore just mentioned this, I mean, I'm looking at some statistics that I found from the World Resource Institute that ranks states in decoupling emissions and GDP growth, and Maryland actually has done a great job with this. Some of the rhetoric that I'm hearing and the discussion on the floor acts as though that we have to take steps now, and we've been taking steps. We've taken a lot of steps. In fact, from 2005 to 2017, this organization says that we had a 38% reduction in our emissions. And I know our goal, really, that's almost to what the goal was for 2030. Now, they may be measuring it slightly differently. But the point is, Maryland is doing a good job of and has continued to since that time, cleaning up our bay. Our air is cleaner than it's probably been since we started doing a lot of the different emissions testing and things of that nature. So we're making tremendous progress. So this attitude that we have to do more, this is the concern that a lot of us have about how much impact we can have on the entire climate or even the regional climate. We're already doing a significant amount on emissions reduction. And look, I think everybody in here wants to see us have clean sources of energy. It is true that even when you use electric, you're not going all fossil fuel free. You still have to use a lot of fossil fuels to utilize electric. So there's a lot of different issues that we can get into, and we may have some amendments that talk about some of this stuff as we move forward. Maybe I'll go ahead and ask the floor leader, the chair, if you would yield for question. A couple questions.
Senator may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess, first of all, having us discuss that we're already made a tremendous amount of progress, how much is appropriate for us to ask working families, small job creators, people in general, to have to pay more for something that is about being more symbolic as it relates to overall results? Because you talked very eloquently about some of the impacts that you feel and believe that our actions before have had. So how much is appropriate to ask?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't call it eloquent, and I wouldn't call it symbolic. I answered that question on an earlier comment. We just have a different take on that issue. We believe that it's going to result in lower costs on energy. So we think the upfront expense will pay lots of benefits to the pocketbook. So I disagree with the basic frame of the question. But secondly, I think people do care about taking steps, which I do not think are symbolic, to try to address climate change. So one, I think it's going to be a savings, and the modeling, and the company was hired by the Hogan administration showed that it was going to be a saving. So I think this is, again, a straw man argument that this is going to cost. I believe if an initial cost is looked at and not the downstream savings, you could make that assertion.
How far?
And we've always had a debate in this legislature. One committee says we have to have green buildings. And I remember years ago, another committee said, but that's a very big cost. And the question became, somebody's looking at a budget, someone else is looking at a longer-term policy. How do those two fit together? And I believe, and I'm speaking for myself, not the committee, sometimes there is an upfront cost that actually pays financial dividends at the backside or downstream. And I think that's what we're talking about here. I don't think this is going to be a cost. Now, can I amortize it over how many years and tell you when it gets a return on investment? I mean, you know, let's talk about solar panels. There's an upfront cost for solar panels. Some people say it's a 5-year, 6-year, 7-year return. It takes 5 to 7 years, maybe 8, to where you get a savings on your energy bill to pay for your initial cost. But in year 8, year 9, year 10, year 11, year 12, you actually have a reduced energy cost. Plus, we're using less fossil fuel, which helps contribute to trying to address this climate crisis. So I don't know how to answer your question other than that.
One way that you answered it, talking about that, of course, you're right. You actually just spoke to the need for balance, because you're right. Of course, if you look at upfront expense on something, you'll always say no, right? So you're right about that. But we do have to look at what the savings and when and how affordable it is for the average person or the average organization up front. I would ask, you're saying yourself that we can't really amortize it right now. And again, we're acting as if that comment almost acts as if we're not doing much already. I mean, look, the solar panels is a really interesting issue. So let me ask you this. With solar panels, I have solar panels on my home, Mr. Chairman. There is a deal that you can go with solar companies that will help consumers. They will take their tax credit and then give them the solar panels. Mr. Musk apparently owns my solar panels because I'm with Tesla now. It got bought out. It was something else before that. Anyway, I'm not advertising. So that's an example of, okay, there's upfront costs, but in a few years you start to recoup. That's not the case with a lot of what we're talking about here. You have to acknowledge it's a.
I believe in most of these that is in fact the case. So I disagree with your conclusion.
Okay. Let me ask a couple questions about the bill, if I might, moving along. On page, there's a climate catalytic fund in the bill. It's $5 million to try to help with, obviously the goal is reducing greenhouse gas emissions. There's also a focus, this fund is, at least in part, focused on energy and weatherization measures to help low to moderate income households. That's one of the aims of the fund. I was curious, on both page 7 and page 24 of the reprint, the fund cannot be used to install new fossil fuel equipment, which I understand the goal is to phase out fossil fuels, but it also, it gets rid of any ability to use any kind of fund to improve the efficiency of existing fossil fuel equipment. So my question is, for a lot of people, the most practical way that they can really reduce their greenhouse gas emissions practically and quickly would be to do some things that help make their current setup, whatever that might be, more efficient. Can you speak to maybe why we're being quite that prescriptive in the bill?
Well, first of all, we're talking $5 million. And the Maryland Clean Energy Center has been a clearinghouse for the state that's been in, I think, in statute, and I know finance committees worked with them for a number of years to encourage innovation in the clean energy sector. Just like your friend Mr. Musk has done some creative things in some sectors, they want to do the same in Maryland for transition to clean energy. And so with $5 million, I don't know, these will be for bridge loans, interest loans, for people who want to invest $5 or $10 or $15 million. The director thinks that we can get a return of maybe $5 or $10 on the dollar in this fund to try to incentivize and encourage people to invest money in this field. look, the list, and I don't want to read it, you've obviously read it yourself. There are a number of categories, and we think they should be the priority. It should be new, innovative, clean technology. You know, maybe battery capture that's being talked about a lot. Improvements in energy management, reducing greenhouse gases, storage capacity of batteries. There are a number of things. You know, we don't think investing in fossil fuel or even improving, there are other funds to do that. I mean, right now, I believe the Empower does that. And if, in fact, they may be switching how they do Empower from the study I've been following. It's just not the top priority. You know, that we have a list of 7 things, we have $5 million. You make judgments.
I think the point I'm trying to make with that question is sometimes if our goal is to dramatically reduce, well, I feel like we already have, based on the statistics I see, dramatically reduce emissions, sometimes doing the most efficient thing, the quickest thing first would help. But I understand your answer to the question. I'll go to a different spot of the bill.
But also to your frame, a study was just recently released by the Able Foundation about 5 months ago. And in that study, I don't have it in front of me, it said some years ago, Maryland was in the top 3 or 5 of states, and they said in the last 5 or 10 years, they've fallen down in the pack. And I can't tell you what the rating is. I didn't have time to pull it up. So I think it depends who you talk to, and if we're making the kind of success and advancement that we all would like to see.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 20, there's another issue that I actually think this is a little subtle thing that I thought was pretty important. There was an addition, it's in the bill, note that it can't be any highway widening and additional road construction are basically not allowed to be part of a consideration for greenhouse gas emission. Now, I understand the goal of wanting to have less perhaps discourage people from taking cars and maybe encourage them more to take public transportation. But I was curious, would this preclude the expansion of highways to put in commuter rail or dedicated bus lanes? And get this credit.
This was put in because in an earlier version in the Climate Commission, which some people like to pull parts from and reject others, in one of their earlier reports, they said the road widening, and this came in the context of road widening on Route 270 in the Beltway, that justified expanding lanes for cars because there was no recommendation for high-speed light rail, even bus lanes at that point. And the rationale given at the Climate Commission meeting, and this is unbelievable, because we are going to have more car lanes, cars will idle less. And because
that's not true?
Yeah, but it misses one of the pieces of the calculation. You're going to have 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 more cars using those. And unless you guarantee they're all net zero emissions, you're going to have gas engine cars that are going to supersede by a long way the lack of idling. I mean,
but it is true.
Many people felt it was fairly oxymoronic to say we're going to build more roads and that's going to help our environment.
Well, I think the more gas prices go, you're going to see more people bite the bullet to buy electric cars, and that may end up.
Is that endorsement of the carbon tax?
It is not, but I think that's perhaps your side of the aisle on that one on the carbon tax. But I think we probably want to try to reduce our gas prices. But
and Senator, before we leave that, MDE took that measure out of their plan.
Which measure?
Justifying highway widening as a climate reduction measure.
Well, I actually, what stuck out to me is as a student of history, one of the things I know that happened in New York was that they did not prepare properly with their infrastructure back in the 1930s and 40s, and so they ended up with situations where they couldn't go back and put in commuter trains. So I wanted to be sure we weren't maybe putting that in to where you can't, because I know I may not even want to do that, but I know there might be future administrations that would like to put in some sort of commuter setup on something like 270. So I thought that's interesting. If we're putting that in there, that's going to preclude that if it's in the bill. So I appreciate the answers, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much. Mr. President, I think we've got some amendments coming, but I think what we're seeing here is a lot of message, but the impact of this bill very, very clearly will make our costs rise for people, and we're not sure that we have the real appreciable trade-off of positive benefit and positive outcomes. The last thing I will say is the bill's been heavily amended, and I think some of the amendments are quite good, but there's still the goal is still in there for net zero for residential. There's still the goal stated in the bill to get rid of household gas appliances, all of those things that were in the original bill. Some of those goals have been amended out as far as timelines, but it's still all in this bill. So by voting on this bill as it currently sits, we've still got the in-state law saying that it's our intent that we are going to phase out gas appliances, gas stoves, all of those things that were in the bill. So I think it's important to make that note. Even with all these amendments and even with removing the timelines, it's important to make that clear that is still in this bill. And that will have an impact and a cost. And it's also just going very, very far into regulating the way people live their daily lives. And then lastly, we talked about, the chairman and I had a good discussion about cost and upfront cost versus benefit. If it is true that in only a few years we would be getting significant cost savings because we make this initial investment, or at least some cost savings because we make this initial investment, I don't know why we would exempt schools out. So with that, Mr. President, I will have a seat. I think there may be some amendments forthcoming.
All right, on the report, further discussion. All right, let's go ahead. All in favor of the report say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The favorable committee report as amended is adopted. We've got amendments to the bill or its title. Chair recognizes Senator from District 30.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Pages
Colleagues, an amendment from the Budget and Taxation Committee.
All right, pages will collect the senator's amendment. As we're waiting for the amendment to be distributed, we still have a lot of work to do beyond this bill. So, we just adjust schedules accordingly. We got to get through a lot of work today. All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this amendment will conform the section of Senate Bill 528 to the Senate Bill 264 bill we just passed on second reader about an hour ago, dealing with community solar. The Budget and Taxation Committee worked very hard, received a lot of input from members and frankly advocates to tailor a program, the community solar program in this instance, to ensure that personal property tax credits will be exempted when the actual energy is going to consumers who are of low or moderate income. So again, a very thoughtful and balanced amendment. Worked with the chair and the bill sponsor on 528 to ensure this conforms correctly. And I move the amendment.
Senator moves the amendment. Chair recognizes the floor leader. No objections from the floor leader. Are there any objections to the senator's amendment? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. Senator Chair, the floor leader has an amendment. The pages will collect the senator's amendment. All right, the senator may explain the amendment.
Mr. President, if this was April 1st, I would say that it is a sponsor amendment that has Republican caucus as co-sponsors. Anyway, Mr. President, there are three amendments in this amendment. The first one addresses the issue of the Conservation Corps, the Environmental Corps that we create to work to put young people to work for a year, particularly in those communities that have been disproportionately affected. It makes a small change to the oversight between the Department of the Environment working with the Corps Board, which you're familiar with, that comes up in your bill. So we wanted to clarify that. We think it makes a smoother transition to provide oversight to those people who work in that program. That's the first part of it. It also makes clear that, and we implied it, but it slipped in our many versions, that the people who work in the core members receive $15 an hour and insurance benefits. That's in this as well. And then there's another final one that adds one heating oil or propane distributor in the state selected by the secretary on the Just Transition Work Group. So, Mr. President, I would move the amendment.
All right, the senator moves the amendment. Chair recognizes the minority leader on the amendment.
Yes, in the spirit of bipartisanship, I think this is a great amendment.
All right, there we go. April 1st? Nope. March 11th. All right. On the amendment, Chair recognizes the senator from District 1 on the amendment.
Yeah, I have a question of my colleague in the back who presented the amendment, just so I'm clear that this takes care of the bill we passed on second reader.
Senator,
This is
yes,
different amendment.
it did, but different amendment.
Yes, but it did. Yes, Senator, it did
So
conform the two.
that'll go through, and what we did there will suffice whether this goes through or not. Is that
Yes,
right?
Yep, Senator, we got it. Thank you. Senator's not been recognized. Thank you. All right, Chair recognizes the senator from the 32nd District on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I want to thank the chair and my colleague from the 43rd District for working with me on this amendment. As your Senate appointment to the Chesapeake Bay Trust, it was very important to me to see the trust reinstated and take the leadership on this course. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and my colleague.
Excellent, thank you. All right, Chair recognizes the senator from the 27th District on the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank the chair as well as the floor leader for including a portion of the amendment about a membership on the committee. So this means a lot to my region of the state. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Senator. All right, any objections to the senator's amendment? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. Are there other amendments to the bill or its title? Chair recognizes the senator from the 21st District has an amendment.
I've requested an amendment which I don't have yet.
All right, I think there are other ones that are on their way. Chair recognizes the senator from the 35th District has an amendment. Pages will collect the senator's amendment.
Yes, Mr. President. I apologize. I just got this a little bit ago, so I didn't get a chance to give to the bill sponsor.
All right. All right, Senator, may I explain the amendment?
Yes, what this does, still, the main goal of this, the state shall achieve net zero statewide greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. Leaves that intact, but says that this bill is contingent on the enaction of similar legislation in a group of states, including New York, New Jersey, West Virginia, Delaware, and Pennsylvania. So what the amendment does, it would keep the main goal and intent of the legislation, but it would make this a regional solution rather than just a single state solution. It also keeps all options on the table. We've talked a lot about electrification, but it's important, I think, that we also consider things like carbon capture, anaerobic digestion, nuclear, all the above type of approach to getting to net zero as we go along. So I would like to move the amendment.
Senator moves the amendment. Chair recognizes the floor leader on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would urge the body to resist this. This essentially says, let's wait for the least among us to be ready to move. I don't know the attitude or posture in West Virginia, for example. I know they've been very reliant on coal and concerned about how that affects their economy. I think any move forward is one they'll resist, so I'm just not sure how this plays. And I think we have to look for the people who want to move forward, not the people who want to stay and remain where we are. I just don't think we can afford to do that because the cost is too high. Earlier, the good senator said, what does it cost? And I think, how do we calculate the cost of asthma? How do we calculate the health costs or the environmental cost in West Baltimore or actually in Garrett County, or if Deep Creek Lake starts to not have the snow melt that it used to have. We can't calculate that, the health or environmental effects. So I think we shouldn't wait till the least among us is ready to move. If we're ready to move, I think we should. I urge a red vote.
All right, on the amendment, Chair recognizes the Minority Whip.
Just speaking in support of the amendment. Interesting conversation again. Concerns about economic impact in a place like West Virginia. We're concerned about the economic impact here when we've already taken the lead. We're way out in front, and now we're going to be adding more onto what our constituents have to sacrifice, suffer, and pay. I would say, asking about what's the cost of different types of health issues, we've already heard today that we really won't be able to measure the effectiveness of the bill in our own climate or our own results here locally. So not sure which it is, but I think an amendment with a compact actually would make this bill much more reasonable, because it would say, hey, we're all in this together. The only way to really have a lot of impact is a regional or national type solution. So this would be the way to go. So I support the gentleman's amendment, and I think we should have I'd like to have it for a roll call, Mr. President, if it hasn't already been asked for.
On the amendment, can we ring the bells, please? Chair recognizes the senator from the 33rd District on the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So on my cheat sheet here, it says the PJM amendment, the PJM compact. One of the things what we have focused on in finance when I was there and here at EHE is the fact that we're interconnected. And much of this bill asks for more energy, electric energy, to be put into Maryland. In order to accomplish this, we're going to have to rely on other states generating electricity. And to include them in a compact of this nature, to rely on our neighbors to help us along to get clean air, clean water, I think makes sense. And I would be very supportive of the amendment and would request the body to vote green on this amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, the question is on the amendment. If there's no Chair recognizes the Minority Leader on the amendment.
Thank you. Just talking on the amendment. Been down here a little while, seen some bills on this floor, some amendments on this floor, and I recall a really important issue we were talking about was a nonpartisan commission for redistricting. And there was a bill that passed this body, and it said we shouldn't create a nonpartisan piece of legislation unless our surrounding states do it. The interesting thing is we didn't override the governor's veto on it, and it didn't go into law. But we did pass that. We thought that was a good idea. And I think what this brings up is the core question. Here in Maryland, is this bill going to make any impact on the North Pole, Annapolis flooding, California fires, whatever? And I think we pretty much heard, even from testimony on both sides, no, it won't. And we differ whether this is symbolic or not, but what we do see is the financial impact that this is going to have on everyday average Marylanders with no impact to the environment. What we're saying is we want to be a role model and hope everybody gets on board because we're doing the heavy lift. It's not going to impact the environment. We're not going to have less floods, but we're going to be tip of the spear, and we're going to make Maryland taxpayers pay that price. And as my colleague from Carroll County mentioned, you know, there was some debate of whether this is going to cost money or save money. Well, we know it's going to cost money. There's no doubt about that. We're mandating that they have to do retrofits for multifamily houses and others. The debate is, you know, how long will it take them to recover it? How many people can put up that much money? But I thought it was very ironic that the biggest exemption in this bill is public schools. Why? Because it has a big price tag. If it's not going to cost anything, why are we exempting them? You can't have it both ways. We want climate solutions. Excellent amendment. Says maybe we can't do a global thing in Maryland. I get that. We can try to influence Washington, D.C. and have a national. I think that's a great idea. But if we can't do the global or the national, let's at least have a regional. We have air and all that coming right in from our borders, and anything we do here is not impacting it.
So this can be a role model and encourage and have our governor and other governors say, look, we just passed this legislation. We want you to join us. Come join us. And get a momentum behind that and build it instead of being isolated. Maryland does it. Taxpayers pay the money. Look at us, the symbol of the tip of the spear. Unfortunately, the Maryland taxpayers are the one getting that result. So I think this is a wonderfully drafted amendment, and I would ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right, on the amendment, Chair recognizes the senator from the 38th District on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank the amendment sponsor, and I'm supporting this amendment and the regional approach. And I want to share with my colleagues why it's especially important to me. My district borders Delaware and Virginia. So I have Delaware to the north of my district and Virginia to the south. And so I'm sensitive to when we take initiatives here, are we putting, when we take an initiative here and others aren't involved or taking those same initiatives, how it impacts my district, in this case, how it impacts our state. And I want to just point out to my colleagues, the World Resources Institute just ranked 41 states decoupling emissions and GDP growth. And Maryland is at the top of the list, reduced its emissions the most, 38%. So once again, we're at the forefront. We're taking on more to lead the way. And yet, we look around at our other states, and they're not going to be suffering the consequences that we will. We're talking about the cost on families. We're talking about the cost on business operators. So I appreciate the regional approach. We've done it on other issues. We can do it on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right, on the amendment, no further discussion. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 29 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Chair recognizes the senator from Montgomery County.
Mr. President, my buttons are all locked up over here, so I'm not sure it's an accident, but it's actually pushed in and won't release, and it's recording nothing. I'd like to be recorded in the red.
In the
Thank
red,
you.
okay. Thank you, Senator. Without objection, so ordered. We'll see if somebody can, if we can have OIS take a quick look to see if it is fixable or not. All right, Chair recognizes the minority whip. Senator has an amendment. Pages will collect the senator's amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Assuming the senator has an amendment. Yes.
And
As we're waiting, Senator, is it stuck in? Is it stuck in, or just was not registering? One too many times. One too many times.
I don't know, the no button sometimes, Mr. President, doesn't get enough use on that side, so, you know, it's jammed.
All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment deals with sort of the procurement section of this bill, not that they're dealing with talking about replacing, the state replacing vehicles with, the goal is to get to replacing our entire state fleet with zero-emission vehicles, zero-emission buses. One of the most fascinating things about the entire climate change and energy debate in our country right now is the way that basically because of the current presidential administration's stance on drilling and mining, we've basically outsourced our pollution, at least the goal of the policy seems to be outsourcing our pollution to China. It's interesting. When we decide that we're going to get rid of fossil fuels, not drill far less over time, we have to rely on things like solar panels and battery-operated materials, battery-operated machinery. All of that stuff gets created, and a lot of it gets created in China. And also in Russia. You know, Russia has the world's largest supply of nickel. And that's what's used to create a lot of the chips that are involved in some of the batteries that go in these cars and also in different things involved with solar panels. So with China and Russia, you have a real axis of authoritarian evil, which we've seen on full display with Russia recently. Now it's ongoing. It's interesting, not only outsourcing our pollution, because China is not following any of the rules that we follow in the United States as it relates to fossil fuels or manufacturing. They're scofflaws. They ignore all the regulations and rules that we've been trying to get, that the world's been trying to go along with. So not only, in my view, we're outsourcing pollution, we also are kind of outsourcing our guilt. That's what we're doing. We're saying, hey, we're going to do things right here, but we'll let China and Russia, to a lesser extent, do all the stuff they do and not follow climate protocols and climate pollution controls, and we'll let them do it. So I always find that very fascinating. But in this case, what this amendment would do is it would simply say that when we're replacing these vehicles, these state vehicles with hybrid zero emission, we're not going to have a vehicle in which any product used in the manufacturing of the vehicle is produced in communist China or Russia. That's the amendment, simply just to say, let's be sure that we're not sourcing our state-funded, state taxpayer-funded products from Russia or from communist China. I would move the amendment, Mr. President. I would ask for a roll call vote.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Chair recognizes the floor leader.
Mr. President, I would urge the body to resist this. You know, this is not a trade bill, nor is it a procurement bill. I believe if you want to get into trade policy with China or procurement, that's a great bill for budget and tax, who now has authority over procurement. But I would urge to resist this. I think this has no place in this bill. I urge a red vote.
All right, Senator, any further discussion on the amendment? If not, all in favor of the amendment, say aye. Senator's requested a roll call vote.
Mr. President.
Clerk, call the roll. Has everyone recorded their vote?
Just to explain my vote, Mr. President.
Change their vote. Explain the vote. Chair recognizes the maker of the amendment.
I think this absolutely does have a place in the bill, because I don't want my tax dollars that being used to create vehicle emission-free, that meeting our goals. I don't want my tax dollars being used on communist Chinese or Russian products as it relates to state procurements. We understand that we do get a lot of things from those two countries, particularly China, in our private sector, but it's hard to kind of control that to such a degree. But in this case, we can certainly control what the state of Maryland's taxpayer dollars are being used for to replace buses and vehicles that should not come from China and Russia.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 35th District has 2 minutes to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to explain my vote on this. You know, I know we're dealing with state issues here, but this is really a national issue as we look at the climate, because it affects all of us all across the globe. And, you know, it's been in the news. We know what's going on in the world with the recent invasion. And, you know, why shouldn't we be a leader on this issue as well here in the state of Maryland, saying, you know what? You know, we all stood in solidarity a couple weeks ago with Ukraine on the front steps there. Well, let's do the same thing here. That's why I'm voting yes on this, because we know what the two of the bad actors are. Let's have these products made from, you know, American made or by one of our allies, not one of our opposition. So that's why I'm proud to put up a green vote on this one.
All right, any further explanations of vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 26 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Chair recognizes the senator from the 32nd District. Senator has an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, pages will collect the senator's amendment.
I want to start out by saying thank you to the committee for their hard work on this bill. But this bill does affect every senator in this room and every one of our constituents and our businesses. So it's an important bill, and I hope that this amendment can be considered favorable from the committee. This amendment fits under how the Climate Catalytic Capital Fund will be used to leverage private capital investment in technology. I think many of you know that I represent the district that includes the airport. And we heard testimony yesterday about the pollution from the planes, not just from BWI Airport, from Martin Airport, from Dulles, from National. The federal government, the Biden report fact sheet says that 11% of our greenhouse gas is from airplane fuels. So all this amendment does is, in the original bill on page 5, line 20, after facilitating electrification of the transportation section, which we know will never electrify planes, This amendment just simply adds, and the use of sustainable alternative fuel. By adding this, it will encourage the leveraging of private capital. And this is already happening in other states. Arkansas, California are already producing sustainable airline fuel. So this could lure a SAF producer to Maryland, as it has in those other states, and there'll be a win-win, beneficially using waste products, which includes chicken litter, and decreasing greenhouse gas. So I ask that you consider this a favorable amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the floor leader on the amendment.
I appreciate my colleague for letting me know about this amendment. Ladies and gentlemen, this fund has $5 million. $5 million. And among its uses are the proposed uses when that money is loaned out is to promote environmental justice and leverage increased private capital investment and technology development in our state, deploy a clean energy generation and energy storage capacity, work in low and moderate income households, investment in new technology. You know, look, I appreciate the airport. It's great. It's a great facility. And I appreciate Southwest Airlines and other companies like that. They've got billion-dollar budgets, billion-dollar budgets. We're putting $5 million in for homegrown technology, and I think they shouldn't be first in line to get this money. It's a very small amount of money. I think it's not about jet fuel, although in the broad scope it is, and hopefully that'll be addressed by the aviation industry over time. But it's to come up with creative things to do in our state for whether it be retrofitting or better energy efficiency in multifamily homes, and our small entrepreneurs across our state who already work with the Clean Energy Center. That's who we want to encourage and build. I think we don't have to offer $1 million or $2 million to a Southwest or a United Airlines, so I would urge you to resist the amendment.
All right, on the amendment, any senators who have not yet spoken wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the senator from the 32nd District on the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And while I appreciate the chairman's comments, I just want to say that BWI uses 12.9 million gallons of jet fuel a month, and it is 11% of our pollution. So I ask for a favorable vote, Mr. Chairman. I'd like a roll call vote.
All right, senators requested a roll call vote. Chair recognizes the senator from District 7 on the
Thank you, Mr. President. I get up in support of this amendment. You know, we talk about Southwest and all these other airlines. This isn't who this money is going to go to, because they just buy their engines and put them on their planes. This is going to go to the research that we've talked about. You know, Maryland has incredible research facilities. You know, you look at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Labs. That's where this money is going to go, to places like that, to come up with the next technology for the next gen jet engine. So that's why I'm supporting this. You know, University of Maryland, other places that are doing this type of research, places, companies that are based out of the Navy base down there, Pax River, couldn't think of it, thanks, that are researching the next military jet engines. That's where this is going to go. So that's why I'm supporting this.
All right, on the amendment, any further discussion? If not, the clerk, apologies. Chair recognizes the senator from the 29th District on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I could have the maker of the amendment, I'd like to ask a question.
Amendment maker yields. Senator may proceed.
Thank you. I have in St. Mary's County, we have a very prosperous airport, not to mention that we have Pax River, as my colleague just mentioned. But the thing is, we also have autonomous vehicles where they are all trained, where they are built. Issue like that, we work with airports all across the country, and I was curious if this amendment not only affected the major airport, but what we do with all the small businesses that result as a result of the smaller airports.
Well, it's for sustainable air fuel, so I would think it would be for all airlines. It's not totally developed yet. It is being developed, but it would be for all airplanes.
Thank you. For that, I'll be.
All right, on the amendment, any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take, let's ring the call. Clerk will take the call. By a vote of 23 to 22, the Senator's amendment is adopted. Are there additional amendments to the bill or its title? Chair recognizes the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have an amendment.
Pages will collect the amendment.
I got one.
All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would call for a roll call, but I wanted to give a shout out to DLS Amendments Office. They're doing a tremendous job with all the work that we have here. So anyway, what this bill does, in the bill on page 47, 49, I believe, there's an alternative compliance tax that's put on people with the retrofit requirement. And what it says is that it can't be less than the social cost of greenhouse gases adopted by the department or EPA. That's very vague. I have not heard what that is going to be. It depends on the building. But what we do know is it can get very expensive. And which I found out today, which I did not know yesterday, that is an annual fee or tax that's put on them. So if it's $50,000, $10, every year they're getting hit with that. So what this does is just basically put a cap of $25,000, saying the annual tax or fee that you can put on somebody for their building is $25,000. I think it's a reasonable amendment. We know what's going to happen with those who are in apartments, whether they're low income, middle income, or whatever. The owner's going to get this. They're going to get the $25,000 fee or tax, and then they're going to hit them on the rent. They're not going to eat the cost. Those people are going to absorb that hit. It gets a little more challenging. I'm not really sure how this bill works on this. If you have a condominium, say 60 of them, and say 10 or 15 of them say, hey, we want to do the energy efficient, so they invest all their money to do that, but the 45 or so others say, we're not putting any money in that. Well, it's based on the whole building. So they have to assess that on every individual condo unit, that generally through a condominium fee. So no matter whether you put it in or didn't, everybody's going to get blasted with that. And we don't want to put $100,000. So anyway, I think this is very reasonable to put a cap on it, and I would move the amendment.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Chair recognizes the floor leader.
Senator colleagues, if we want to say we're just doing this for kicks, you should support this. Because essentially it allows owners of, we'll say, large office buildings, 20, 25-story office buildings, to add a little line at the end of their cost-benefit sheet and say $25,000 compliance fee, it's a cost of doing business. Essentially it says, if you want to cast a blind eye at the laws of Maryland and at the action of the legislature, this is their out. Either we believe that we have to address climate change with as many tools as we can, or we can say it's not that important, and if a large company wants to buy their way out of it, it's fine. You know, these companies are making millions and billions of dollars, and should they be accountable for making change and address climate change? A lot of places around the country, they're saying yes, they are responsible for some of this. They've benefited from it. And we are giving them multiple paths to adjust. We're giving 12 years. They want to do windows, they want to do solar, they want to do heat pumps, they can do whatever they want to do. They normally do it in the normal course of business anyway. This just says you can wink, pay $25,000, and you're off the hook. And if things get worse in climate, so be it. I would urge a red vote.
All right, on the amendment, any further discussion? Any senators who have not yet spoken wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the minority leader on the amendment.
Thank you, and I'll be brief. This is an annual tax or fee. So over 4 years, they'll be penalized up to $100,000. And let's not make a mistake. What was said by the floor leader was they're going to buy their way out of it, these rich business owners. Well, I tell you what, they're not dumb. When an apartment complex owner gets this fee, do you really think they're going to absorb it? They're going to pass it on to your constituents, your low income, your moderate income, and this is protecting our individual families in Maryland. If you think $25,000 is too low every year to do that, that would protect the individual families that will get this to their rent or through their community association fee, then don't support this.
All right, questions on the Chair recognizes the floor leader on the amendment.
I forgot to mention, there is a cost effectiveness test in the legislation.
All right, on the amendment, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Mr. President.
Yes, Senator.
That's for roll call.
Senator requests a roll call vote. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. Oh, sorry, to explain their vote?
Well, I just want to say that, Rule 93, when members are on the floor, they have to vote. So let's just make sure we're following the rules.
Thank you, Senator. All right, with 27 votes, that's 20 and 27 is 47. So 27 votes, the Senator's amendment fails. Senator, Chair recognizes the minority leader has an amendment. These pages will collect the amendment. All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we've established there's a mandate that they have to do retrofitting to these multifamily buildings. And so this bill was amended to say, you know what, we actually do realize there's some costs coming in here. And we're going to put $5 million to help them. And if they spent $5,000 to put their windows in or whatever, that's 1,000 families. Not very much money. So I looked up the report on Maryland poverty. There's over 500,000 Maryland residents in poverty. 500,000. And that's not even including the moderate income that's allowed under this bill for that $5 million. $5 million would be about 1,000 people. We're probably talking tens of thousands, maybe more than that, could use the money. If we're serious about this, we need to put the money up to help them. $5 million is a drop in the bucket. So what this amendment simply says is for the next 3 years, instead of $5 million, we're going to put $50 million in to help our low income and our moderate families, help them join our fight with the climate solution. We've exempted ourselves as a state on some things, so we don't have to pay. We should help our low income and our moderate. We have a budget surplus of like $4 billion. This is a drop in the bucket in that. I think this is a reasonable amendment to help those that are hurting. And I would ask for a roll call, please.
All right, Chair recognizes the floor leader on the amendment.
I thought it was I who was going to call for the roll call. I appreciate this tax and spend measure of adding $50 million to the state's budget. So I appreciate the willingness to spend that money and raise taxes on the people of Maryland. So I thank you for the concept. But ladies and gentlemen, we put a few $1 million in to get started on this. We have created a group called the Building Energy Transition Implementation Task Force to come back to us with what kind of incentives we might need to move forward. And let me tell you who was on it. Secretary of Housing and Community Development, Energy Administration, Public Service Commission, and then, to give you a flavor, representative of the Apartment and Office Building Association, Affordable Housing, property manager in apartment buildings, property manager for commercial buildings, a representative financial institution, private equity firm, and a number of other people. We think it's broad, it's reasoned, and we think we should do this in a thoughtful way, deciding what kind of support they should do. It shouldn't be done in a few minutes on an amendment on March 10th, so I would urge you to resist this amendment.
All right, on the amendment, any senators who have not yet spoken wish to speak? Chair recognizes the Chair of Budget and Taxation.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to speak against this amendment. $50 million. There's a lot of talk. First off, I agree with the chairman. Look, the way this was set up in the program, we can always alter this over time if we need to. But there's a lot of conversation about these billions of dollars that are out there. And I need to make it clear to everyone that the vast majority of that money is one-time money. And to put in a mandate for a number of years, $3 million to $50 million, considering all the other requests that are out there and considering all the other issues that the committee has been considering, I would urge a red vote on this.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any senators who have not yet spoken wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the maker of the amendment on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our committee thought it was important to put money into this. We're just debating how much. And I know the Budget Committee is getting all kind of requests. It's a unique situation. We have $4 billion surplus. We have a structural surplus. This is not a structural payment. This is over 3 years, and it's done. And as far as raising taxes, we don't need to raise taxes. We have a surplus. Taxes have come in. Federal money has come in. We can use that for that, and we should give it back to them. I've heard a familiar strategy. I don't know where I've heard it before, but it's, let's vote on this bill, and then we'll create a task force to figure out how to do it and how to pay for it. We have the opportunity here to stand up. We know there's going to be cost on low income, moderate income people. And if you look at Massachusetts, who did something similar to this, they didn't set aside $50 million. You know how much they set aside? $3 billion. That was in the testimony before our committee. They were serious, they were honest, they knew it would cost money, and they said, we're going to partner with our citizens in the state, and we as a state are going to put the money in to help you because climate is important. What we're here saying is, we're going to give a little drop in the bucket, help a few families, the rest of you are on your own, and we've got this task force, after we spend our surplus money, that's going to come back and say, we need more money. Well, the money's gone. We've already allocated it. So this is the time to act. This is the time to help the people of Maryland. Thank you.
All right, on the amendment, Chair recognizes Chair Budget and Tax.
I just want to clarify something. 3 years is a structural issue. Anything beyond 1 year is a structural issue. So what you're really talking about is $150 million. And given all the calculations that are going right now, I continue to suggest that we no vote on this.
All right, on the amendment, no further discussion. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 38 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Are there further amendments? Chair recognizes the minority leader with an All right, Senator may explain the amendment.
And Mr. President, I apologize. I just got this amendment before I started offering the other ones, so if you want to have time to look at it, we can put it back later, but.
We got it.
Okay. So I think some of the discussion we had today was we were putting a heavy burden on the people of Maryland, and the biggest exemption we have in this bill is to exempt out the schools. This simply just says, no, the state should be on equal ground with the people. We won't exempt them. And I'd ask for a roll call.
All right, on the amendment, the chair recognizes the floor leader.
Senator, where in the reprint does this go? I mean, I got it 8 seconds ago.
And I apologize for that. Like I said,
I heard.
It says on page 24,
All
and
right.
then on page 21. And like I said, we have some other amendments if you
print.
want to push it back.
Well, I'd just like to at least see where it is.
I believe it's the 3 exemptions. You have the historical building, the schools, and agricultural structures.
Oh, this isn't taking out all schools, it's taking out non-public schools. Okay, okay. We made a policy decision in the committee that they should be in this posture, and I would urge a red vote on this amendment.
On the amendment, any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 30 votes, hold on, strike that. On the board is not the right one. Let's give us just one moment. All right, we strike the last vote. We had the wrong one in the system. So on the minority leader's vote, yes, chair recognizes the senator from District 4.
I have a question. We're trying to, on this amendment, does this take the schools out, or does this put them in?
Let's yield to the maker of the amendment.
Yeah, thank you. So basically what this says is that the state is saying we're exempting schools from all these requirements, but we're placing them on all the Maryland businesses, multifamilies, and so forth. So instead of doing that, I think it should be an equal ground that everybody has to abide by this and not exempt the biggest amount of state building or county buildings.
Okay, this is non-public is what I got in front of me. So that's private schools too?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
All right. No further discussion. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 43 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Are there further amendments to the bill or its title?
Mr.
Chair recognizes the
President.
senator from the 33rd district has an
Thank you very
amendment.
much.
Pages will collect the senator's amendment. All right. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Of all the things that I particularly like about this bill is that the committee has put in place several off-ramps where the body has to take a big, deep breath and ask whether or not a specific portion of the bill should be continued. This amendment focuses on Section 5, Energy Performance Standards. And what this means is, at a certain point in time, we're going to all sit back and say, good program, bad program, achieving the goals, not achieving the goals, too much expense on our businesses and our residents, or maybe we should go a little faster. So the current bill strikes the number 7. 2027 is currently the status in the bill. So in 2027, this body and the House will then come along and decide whether or not to move it along. But my amendment says, Mr. President, that it's important for us to review this sooner. So I've changed the date from 2027 to 2026. 2027 is the 3rd year of the next term. This makes it the 2nd year, several years left in the term of that current body of the General Assembly to do a good evaluation, a comprehensive evaluation. Would request a favorable report on this amendment.
All right, the senators move the amendment. Chair recognizes the floor leader.
Ladies and gentlemen, at numerous places in the bill, various sections have sunsets. Some do not. The 2045 net zero, I believe, does. The 2040 retro does. Ladies and gentlemen, if we start shrinking this much more, people are going to see this not just as symbolic, but as not serious. And I think we have been thoughtful in the committee. We've listened to amendments. Again, we think we have arrived at a very reasonable approach that it sends a message we have to start making changes, but there's enough time to make those changes, and at certain points we come back here to come to the legislature to proceed with the bill. This brings it way too soon. It, I think, sends a message that we're not serious, and I would urge a red vote.
All right, on the amendment, any further discussion? If not, all in favor of the amendment say aye. Opposed, nay. The noes have it. The amendment fails. Are there further amendments to the bill or title? Chair recognizes Senator from District 6.
Yes, Mr. President, I have an amendment, please.
All right, clip pages will collect the senator's amendment. Giving the pages a workout today, getting those steps in.
Got the steps.
Hopefully the Fitbit is operational. All right, Senator May explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'd like to have a roll call on this, please. But I want to offer this amendment to protect our houses of worship, including our churches, our synagogues, and other places of worship. I think if you look and you see and you ask this question, for instance, the Mormon Tabernacle in Kingston, Maryland, the First Baptist Church in Glenarm, the Raid Temple in AMC Church in Glendale. There's the Evangelical Cathedral in Upper Maryland and also in Rosedale. The Church of the Redeemer in Gaithersburg, the Islamic Center of Maryland in Gaithersburg also. And there's Beth Israel congregation in Owens Mills. I know that we don't know the exact amount of measurements of these places, but there's one thing I can say. When you look at Google, these places are pretty big. Matter of fact, the Mormon Tabernacle was over 160,000 square feet. And knowing that, I think this place also was just renovated. And it's going to take a lot of money for these type of places and churches and synagogues to do something like this. And I got to say, you think about gas prices right now, you can think about food prices, house prices, they're rising, and truly they're at unbelievable levels. I would ask that we would not take put a further burden on our houses of worship and their congregations and exempt this. I think just an opportunity to show a little mercy to those that are giving to their communities. And I appreciate the vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the floor leader on the amendment.
Mr. President, colleagues, the committee considered this amendment and discussed it and rejected it for a number of reasons. One, there's a study going to be done, so this is premature. If at the end of that study they think they need an exemption, they should have it. But the other thing to understand is, as I mentioned earlier, this is going to be done sector by sector. So it's not like a large religious facility over 25,000 square feet is going to be measured against an office building or a multifamily home. So they're going to be looked at of what they're emitting, and then a recommendation will be made. We discussed it. It'll be done by size, obviously, and we thought they should be included. You know, some of the strongest proponents for addressing climate change came from the religious community. They are very committed to this. Their testimony from different denominations in support of this, and they all have said they want to play their part. For those reasons, the committee rejected, and I urge you to vote red.
All right. On the amendment, Chair recognizes the minority whip, followed by the senator from the 47th district.
Thank you, Mr. President. Couple points here. Number one, religious facilities, churches, mosques, synagogues, they're a pretty diverse set of buildings. Some churches look almost like entertainment venues now, whereas others have big steeples. There's some amazing, like, Greek Orthodox churches that drive by in northern Baltimore County when I'm driving from Carroll County to Hunt Valley. There's an amazing a church there. There's the Mormon Tabernacle down just into Montgomery County, and the list goes on and on. It's going to be really hard to do an apples-to-apples comparison of energy savings and emission savings and usage with places of worship. And then number two, you know, the chair mentioned that different denominations had come in to support this bill. You know, if they support the bill and its aims, this amendment will not keep a church from becoming more energy efficient. And most churches I know and have been involved with have always tried to become more energy efficient anyway. So I think it's just good to exempt. I think this is a good amendment to exempt. We have a pretty proud history in our country of making sure that religious organizations have some freedoms that businesses and other groups don't have. So I think this is a good amendment. I would urge the body to adopt it.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from the 47th district.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to find this in the reprint. I'm just where we are located. If I could just get some help just to understand.
Maybe we could ask the chair of the committee. Let's ask the maker of the amendment.
It's on page 21 of the amendment.
Oh, Senator, actually, I see the issue here.
Yes, sir.
This is on Senate Bill 528 as amended by the committee. So it is on the amended bill. It's not on the first bill file.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm looking in the reprint and I'm still struggling to.
It's on the Senator, if Senator looks at the EHE amendments, the committee amendments, which is 303024. And then in the amendment, on Amendment 8, that's where it would start. So it's in the committee amendments. It's drawn to the committee amendments.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Gladly. We always have to check. This is actually an interesting piece. Always have to check what it's being drawn to. This is one of the places where things can get awry. It's why the paper copy, I actually think it actually makes a big difference. But all right, on the amendment, further discussion. Chair recognizes Senator from District 4.
Yeah, I'm going to speak in favor of this. In fact, I was looking at, remember when we did the rain tax, I'm looking right now, some local jurisdictions like Prince George's County actually exempted churches. I'm looking at an article right now. So I know there is a precedent for this, that when we've had these environmental fees, in the past we had local governments that were exempting their churches out. And some of these churches are very large. And this is going to have a very detrimental effect to come in and have them forced to redo all, pay these fines and redo all their furnaces. And some of these places, most of these churches, a lot of them are doing great work. They're providing food and meals and important community services. And I just think this is in line with what we've done in the past, in which we've allowed the exemption specifically in jurisdictions that have a lot of the mega churches. So I ask the body to accept this amendment. Thank you.
All right, on the amendment, Chair recognizes the minority whip on the amendment.
Just confirming, I think that the maker of the amendment asked for a roll call, but we would like a roll call vote.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any further discussion? Chair recognizes the maker of the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just say, I mean, I look at this, we do have so many churches in our state, throughout our city and our counties. We have mega churches. We have all kinds of other places of worship, and people worship the way they do. And we see how much bigger they have become. I know churches in my community, in my county, and other neighboring districts and counties, how big churches they have. And guess what? I know personally my church is going to be bigger because they have more people coming in. Why? Because they found a good church. And you have other places of worship that are getting bigger. They're not getting smaller, they're getting bigger. So you think about your community and your place of worship, and this will affect you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. All right, any further discussion? Chair recognizes Senator from Montgomery County on the amendment.
I just had a question for the maker of the amendment, if he would yield for a question.
Will the maker of the amendment yield?
Yes, sir.
Senator may proceed.
I think I understand this, but I just want a clarification. Obviously, we all know what a place of worship means. But what does it mean by an associated building? Is that something attached to it?
Well, see, what they do have, they have parishes. They have places beside it, such as they have fellowship halls.
Okay.
They have places where the pastors stay. As a part of their, it's a part of their, I guess.
Yeah, so I got it. I mean, it's what I thought it was.
like that.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I just want a clarification.
All right, any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 28 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Are there any further amendments? Chair recognizes the senator from the 36th district, followed by the 34th. Pages will collect the senator's amendment.
Mr. President, one last one. I actually wanted to change a vote on a previous amendment. Can I just do that while they're handing them out? It's
Sure.
amendment number 153924, 153924 from green to red. Thank you.
All right, from green to red, 1-5. Okay, we have it. Any objections to the senator's motion? Without objection, so ordered. It doesn't change the outcome of a vote, correct? Okay.
Mr. President.
Yes, chair recognizes Senator from District
I
1.
would also, there's a little slit between these buttons here.
They're frozen,
I had
maybe.
my thumb on the slit and it went the wrong way on on one of these amendments, which only has happened maybe a handful of times in 40 years. I'd like to change my vote on the same amendment from green to red.
From green to red, Senator, are there any objections? I think we have the number. Hold on one second, hold on, we got a lot of. All right, with any objections to Senator from District 1? Chair recognizes Senator from the 35th District.
Same.
Same one, green to red. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered.
Same.
Chair recognizes the Senator from District 7. Same amendment. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. This does not change the outcome of the vote, correct? Okay. All right. Senator from the 36th District has an amendment. Senator may explain the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I've mentioned many times in my comments about this piece of legislation of the concerns for the preemption language that has been added to the bill once the all electrification requirement came out. And as I said several times, I'm very much concerned that a county decides to go further than this legislation allows and essentially enacts a de facto gas ban that would put detrimental damage on the electric grid as it's currently exists. So, Mr. President, this just simply exempts the preemption language within this bill.
All right, thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the floor leader on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, this would block at least one county and maybe other counties out there that are already moving on emission standards. They are not moving on energy sources. They're moving on emission standards. This bill sets emission reduction standards, and the question becomes, should that be a floor or should it be a ceiling? And if other counties want to have the flexibility to go further and ask certain things in their respective jurisdictions, should we block them from doing it? As I mentioned earlier to the Senator from Montgomery County has already endorsed and passed, I think through their county council, a policy on emission standards, not on electrification or gas pipes, none of that. It's on emissions. and they have taken this challenge of climate crisis to heart. They want to take certain steps, and it may be very well true that Baltimore County or Dorchester County or someone else wants to take certain steps. I don't think we should block them from doing that. I would urge a red vote.
All right. Any further discussion on the amendment? Any senators who have not yet spoken? Chair recognizes the senator from 36th District on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure that this, Mr. President, this is very clear that it would not allow a de facto ban on natural gas. If a county decided to go to an all-electrification model that we saw in the previous bill, again, this language was not in the previous bill, the bill is submitted, but then when that language was taken out, this language was added in there. And whether or not this is building standards or not, they could clearly, a county could clearly enact their own legislation that would put that de facto natural gas ban in place. So I think it's very important that we don't see one, maybe two counties acting on their own. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor
Roll
of
call.
the senator's request a roll call vote, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote, explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 31 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Senator has another amendment. Pages will collect the senator's amendment. As the amendment is being collected, just a quick scheduling update. We still have a fair amount of work, so we want to make sure that folks, our incredible Secretary of the Senate's office, who does not get a chance to walk out in any way, has a chance to take a break. So at 2 o'clock, we'll do a 10-minute recess. We'll come back after that to finish up the rest of the work. So adjust calendars. Chairs, if we can push back hearings, apologies, but we are where we are. All right, Senator can explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. A follow-up amendment to what I just asked about. This allows the preemption language to stay in the bill as it's written, but the way that the bill is currently written, that if a county chooses to enhance the building performance standards, that it has to be approved by the department. And in this case, the department is the Department of Environment. So this amendment simply says that if something were, if a increase in energy performance standards were to go in place at a specific county, that the Public Service Commission would also get to take a look at it. So it changes the gatekeeper on what the counties may do from simply the Department of Environment to the regulator of our electric service grid. And let me tell you why that's important, Mr. President. If one county in a service territory decides to adopt a goal that, let's say, removes natural gas, then it stands to reason that that county's electric grid would have to be increased in order to take the demand of electricity based on the loss of gas. So let's just say Montgomery County decides that, hey, we're going to do a natural gas ban. Well, in order to pay for all of that electric upgrade, all ratepayers in the entire service area would have to pay that because those costs would be socialized over all ratepayers. So, for instance, Montgomery County would say we're going to all natural gas or eliminating natural gas, all electric. The grid needs to be modified and enhanced in order to accommodate that, and PEPCO makes those changes, yet everybody in the entire service area has to pay for those socialized costs. So this would just make sure that a county cannot act without the Public Service Commission, who again is the regulator of a efficient, reliable electric grid, has some input. Doesn't say they can't do it, but the same as the initial bill says where MDE takes a look at it, well then the Public Service Commission should take a look at that as well too. So I ask that this is a favorable amendment.
All right, Senator moves the amendment. Chair recognizes the floor leader on the amendment.
colleagues, basically for the same reason we rejected the last one. Ladies and gentlemen, the Public Service Commission doesn't have any hand in performance standards and emissions. That's not what they do. They deal with utilities. That's what they do. If a county wants to require things that are going to have energy efficiency with windows or whatever to address their reductions, it's just not in the PSC's purview. It's in the MDE's purview. And in fact, they cannot move forward in any county unless it's approved by the department. We have a very clear fail-safe and check and balance. This measure would try to restrict any county from having any other authority to go beyond that. I urge a red vote.
All right. Are there any senators who have not yet spoken who wish to speak? If not, Chair recognizes the senator from the, or maker of the amendment.
Mr. President, it's been mentioned several times that different counties are already moving towards this. So we keep trying to talk and focus this on building standards, but the reality is that this language would allow them, sure, to go through performance standards. It's not just admissions, but it allows it to go through performance standards that could put in place a de facto natural gas ban. And so it's not under the purview of the Department of Environment to decide, sure, on building standards, that might make sense. But if this affects the entire grid, then the Public Service Commission should be able to say something. And I don't want to discredit, it's been mentioned several times on the floor today that Prince George's County, that Montgomery County is looking at this. Howard County is looking at this as well. So now you're talking about a completely different service territory. If Howard County decides to go with a de facto natural gas ban, then the cost of increasing the electric grid for the reliability, which is what the Public Service Commission is responsible for. No, the Department of Environment is not responsible for reliability. PSC is. And so if the PSC says, hey, Howard County is going to go to all electrification, the grid needs to be increased, then everybody in the BGE service territory would have to pay for the actions of that county. And I think that's why it's important that we allow the regulators, the people that know best about how the energy grid works, that is responsible for the reliability, has at least some say in this. The same way the Department of Environment does, Public Service Commission would have some say in it as well.
All right. Any further discussion on the amendment? If not, all in favor of the, Chair recognizes the senator from the third, yep. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
has everyone recorded their vote? Everyone explained their vote? Chair recognizes the senator from the 37th district. All right. If not, the clerk will take the call. With 26 votes in the negative, the senator's amendment fails. Chair recognizes the senator from the 37th district as an amendment. Pages will collect the amendment.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll do a recess after this amendment.
Thank you very much. I have an amendment, and if you all go and if you're looking at your bill and go to, I think it's page 16 or 17 of the bill, the commission is charged with developing a working group called the Transition, Employment, and Retaining Working Group of the commission. There are a number of members, I think some 20-some members who are prescribed in the bill. What this amendment would do is to add 2 members from the utilities industry, one from the smaller either municipalities or co-ops and one from the larger. And I would just like to build on my colleague from the Upper Eastern Shore's comments that as we are transitioning and as we are moving into alternate sources of fuel, and yes, we will be impacting changing standards, performance standards for all that will impact the building industry, we are impacting the utilities infrastructure. And right now, probably in the last couple of years, there have been an increase in the rates, and that's because we have to maintain that infrastructure. And we do have problems with the grid. We're on the Eastern Shore. We get most of our power from across the middle of the country. but we want to make sure that we have representatives on that work group who can really understand the bigger picture of the job. So I would just ask that this be a friendly amendment to add 2 additional members to that work group. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you,
Mr.
Senator.
President.
Chair recognizes the chair of the committee.
In the spirit of bipartisanship, we accept the amendment.
All right. Any objections?
Thank you very much.
Any objection to the senator's amendment? Without objection, the amendment is adopted. All right, let's do this. We're going to pause here. We're going to recess here. So what time is it? So let's say 2:10. Madam Majority Leader, if we could recess until 2:10. Yes, Chair recognizes Senator. From the 18th
I'm happy to
district.
wait till you finish your comments, Mr. President.
Oh, no, we were about to recess, but.
Okay. All right, then as discussed yesterday, Mr. President, the Montgomery County delegation is going to go immediately from here to the Silver Room for a quick vote on one bill.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Chair recognizes the Majority Leader.
Thanks, Mr. President. I move this Senate of Maryland stand in recess until 2:10
Without
today.
Without objection, so ordered.